Chapter 1424. On the night of the championship, Bai Xiaowen accepted an interview on behalf of the White Phoenix team and announced the disbandment of the White Phoenix team. Bai Xiaowen retired. His 4 teammates also announced their retirement one after another. For a time, the Huaxia division was in an uproar. Even fans of the International League were dumbfounded. What happened to being at the top since the debut? What happened to the embryonic form of a dynasty? Gone, all gone. White Phoenix disbandment hashtag quickly became the #1 trending topic. Countless fans were looking for the reason. For a time, countless conspiracy theories and shady sayings were flying around. In fact, Bai Xiaowen explained his reason for retirement very clearly in the interview: life is a process of climbing one mountain after another. I like the feeling of a challenge and hate being stuck in the same place. Whether it's the A-League or the Super Cup, it's no longer a challenge to me. Not only the fans of the White Phoenix team, but the fans of the entire Huaxia division also posted to urge him to stay. But Bai Xiaowen had already made up his mind. In contrast, the major media praised the White Phoenix team highly for their courageous retirement. It was unknown whether there was any incitement from the major powerhouse guilds. However, the disbandment of the White Phoenix team and Bai Xiaowen's retirement did indeed allow the major powerhouse teams to breathe a sigh of relief. If the White Phoenix team did not disband and fought in the Super Cup and the domestic league, they would definitely defend their title. There was no doubt about that. This was the most despairing problem. Bai Xiaowen and his teammates were generally only level 8. They still had a lot of room for growth. Therefore, the departure of the White Phoenix team was the best outcome for them. In order to suppress the White Phoenix team and make it difficult for them to go back on their word, the major powerhouses mobilized their media mouthpieces to add fuel to the fire and deify the White Phoenix team. No one knew where it started, but there was a saying circulating on the internet. The White Phoenix never disbands, the champion forever. The White Phoenix never leaves, the champion forever. The White Phoenix, the strongest team in history. Bai Xiaowen scanned his personal strength for the last time on the virtual battle platform and left his complete data. This data shocked the upper echelons of the virtual combat platform. They rushed over to discuss with Bai Xiaowen and decided to sell King of the Super Cup, Bai Xiaowen, as a standalone hero. It would not be combined with the previous Prince of Psychics, Bai Xiaowen. In addition to having a powerful army of summon creatures, the King of the Super Cup, Bai Xiaowen, also had an individual damage output that could not be underestimated, as well as a set of strange and unpredictable Huaxia Dao arts. Such a powerful character could almost brainlessly crush any existing hero character. It would pose a great challenge to the current balance of the game. Therefore, the virtual combat platform disabled this character in combat mode. It could only be used in story mode. It was the first time that the game had banned a character. In addition, a world-famous team management game called Team Manager also came to fight for Bai Xiaowen's authorization to include Bai Xiaowen as a star player in the Team Manager game. Every star player had an ability value. For example, star players like Lightning Dharmaraja and Roaring Heavenly Lord all had fluctuating ability values of 90 to 95. Bai Xiaowen's ability value was 100. There was no upper or lower limit. The skills that this team management game designed for Bai Xiaowen were also ridiculously powerful. King of the Arena: if a match is drawn in the arena mode, your team will win directly. Team Leader: your teammates can always perform to their maximum ability value. Tactical Brain: in team battle mode, all your team members' ability value plus 5. There were also hidden abilities that needed to be unlocked, such as Trickster Demon Master, Foresight, and so on. In short, it could be said that this was the strongest character in the Team Manager game. Bai Xiaowen did not care about the popularity of the internet. After saying goodbye to his family and friends and making arrangements for various businesses, he and his teammates all chose to evolve and leave Earth. White light flashed and the familiar feeling of weightlessness came. When the 5 members of the White Phoenix team opened their eyes again, they were already in a starry sky. It's a bit similar to the checkout interface. We should have arrived in the spirit realm? Qiao Rui was the first to speak. Bai Xiaowen said, should be. Everyone, take a look at your respective statuses. There's a prompt. The Spirit Realm's rule prompt message, you have chosen to evolve. The class ancient book you have chosen is, Tai Gong's Art of War. Inheriting class ancient book, a stream of information flowed into Bai Xiaowen's mind. He closed his eyes. It was as if there was a large golden book in his mind, flipping page by page. At the same time, a gentle white light enveloped Bai Xiaowen. He could feel that his bones, flesh, and skin were all undergoing minute changes. These changes were more like some kind of optimization. There was no pain in this process. Instead, it made him feel comfortable. It was like the growth of plants. It was a kind of imperceptible but real growth process. After an unknown amount of time, Bai Xiaowen opened his eyes. He felt that his entire person had become different. I don't need to breathe anymore. This was the first change that Bai Xiaowen discovered. A mysterious energy flowed through his limbs, bones, and internal organs, allowing him to survive without needing to take in oxygen from the outside world. In his dantian, there was only a small ball of elemental energy, but it had expanded several times. With a thought, Bai Xiaowen's fist was covered in a layer of faint white light. When he mobilized elemental energy, it was much easier than before. The Spirit Realm's rule prompt, congratulations, you've become an evolver. You have obtained a unique energy slot, elemental energy. Your basic priority has changed to level 7. You have lost your skill slot. All of your skills no longer occupy your skill slot. Bai Xiaowen's expression changed slightly. This meant that all of his skills had become awakening skills. In other words, awakening skills were the true nature of skills. The skills that awaken ones learn through skill books were only the watered-down versions after being digitized. For evolvers, there should be no such thing as awakening skills. He glanced at his teammates beside him. They were all shrouded in white light with their eyes closed. Obviously, the inheritance had not yet ended. The spiritual realm's rules continued to send messages, detected that you possess a special item, Overlord's Proof. Detected that you have already learned the occupation classic, Typing Arts. Would you like to use Overlord's Proof and use Typing Arts as your second occupation classic? Bai Xiaowen decisively chose yes. However, there was no white light this time. Only streams of information flowed into Bai Xiaowen's brain. Soon, in Bai Xiaowen's mind, or rather in his sea of consciousness, there was an additional Typing Arts besides the big book Taiping's Art of War in the middle of Bai Xiaowen's mind. Bai Xiaowen immediately said, I want to change my second occupation classic to Taishu Sutra. Chapter 1425. The Spirit Realm's laws prompted, detected 65% compatibility between Typing Arts and Taishu Sutra. You can cultivate them. All traces of Typing Arts cultivation will be abolished, and you will face an even more difficult class test. Confirm? Class test? What's that? Bai Xiaowen inquired, but the Spirit Realm's laws did not give him any answer. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes and chose to confirm. Thus, after being used as a tool, Typing Arts rolled out of Bai Xiaowen's consciousness and was honorably retired. The Taishu Sutra that Bai Xiaowen had forcibly copied turned into a stream of information that flowed into Bai Xiaowen's mind. This was different from the version that he had forcibly memorized. There were many new insights. It was like an obscure ancient book that had been given detailed annotations by a grandmaster. Bai Xiaowen felt that after learning the Taishu Sutra, the second-class manual, the elemental energy in his body seemed to have changed. He immediately used his inner vision and could see that the elemental energy ball that was originally slightly illusory had become somewhat solid. The Art of War was divided into 3 parts, upper, middle, and lower. Currently, Bai Xiaowen only had the upper part in the beginner's state. He had not learned the middle and lower parts yet. The Taishu Sutra was divided into 9 parts, and Bai Xiaowen was currently beginner's part of the first part. Dao Technique, Displacement Transposition. Bai Xiaowen's figure instantly appeared 20 meters in front of him. He nodded and let out a sigh of relief. As expected, As long as he had the foundation of elemental energy, the low-level Tao techniques that he had learned from the middle part of the Taiping arts could still be used. Bai Xiaowen took out the middle part of the Taiping arts and used his inner vision to look at it. He found that he could already see the 81 Tao techniques of the second class. Being able to look at them through inner vision meant that he could cultivate and learn them. Bai Xiaowen understood. It seemed that after becoming an evolved person, he had moved from being digitized to being real. As long as an evolved person could obtain the corresponding manuals and have the same foundation, such as elemental energy, they could learn any skills they wanted. A notification came from the spirit realm's laws. You have become an evolved person in advance at Awaken Level 8. Due to your performance in the Great Unification War, you have received double the compensation of your attribute growth. You have received 8 points of strength, 8 points of agility, 8 points of constitution, and 20 points of spirit. Your awakened equipment is unable to resonate with the body of an evolver and will automatically fall off. You can convert your equipment into equivalent spirit crystals. Clack clack clack, Bai Xiaowen's head equipment, Emperor's Crown, automatically fell off and flew out. Everything, including the Soul Stone, all of his equipment, all of his equipment, all of his equipment, including the Black Soul Stone, all flew and floated in front of him. After losing all his equipment, Bai Xiaowen's attributes plummeted. Now, he only had his basic attributes. Bai Xiaowen did not panic. Every awakened person should be like this when they evolved. He was not an exception. Bai Xiaowen recalled Owl's 3 pieces of advice. The second one was to wear your best equipment. Owl would not trick him for no reason, so the main point he wanted to express should be the spirit crystals converted from equipment. Bai Xiaowen said in his mind, check the use of spirit crystals. The spirit realm's law said, spirit crystals are the crystallization of psionic particles. They can be used to assist in cultivation and speed up an evolved person's cultivation progress. Bai Xiaowen understood. Just like the spirit stones in cultivation, spirit crystals could assist in cultivation. They could also be used as a currency between evolved people. Every awakened person's equipment would be converted into spirit crystals when they became an evolved person. This was also the first starting capital for an awakened person to step on the path of evolution. No wonder Owl asked Bai Xiaowen to wear the best equipment. Awakened equipment was basically meaningless to an evolved person. No matter how luxurious the equipment was, it was useless if it could not resonate with an evolved person's physique. It was better to convert it into spirit crystals to get through the more difficult early stage. The other equipment was fine, but Bai Xiaowen could not bear to part with the Black Soul Stone. If there's no other way, I'll transfer the Black Soul Stone to Xiaojun when I have the chance to return to Earth. Even if this thing can be converted into a lot of spirit crystals, I can't bear to part with it, Bai Xiaowen said in his mind. He picked up the Black Soul Stone that was floating in front of him. Now, the stone had become gray and translucent like when he first saw it. Suddenly, an item in Bai Xiaowen's storage space started to heat up. It was actually resonating with the Black Soul Stone. Bai Xiaowen quickly took out the item. It was a mask as thin as a cicada's wing. It was the mysterious mask that he had looted from the corpse of Nagori, the incarnation of the god of death. Bai Xiaowen still remembered that he could not see the function of the mask at the time. There was only a description that said he could only check it after he became an evolved person. God of Death's visage, divinity item. A part of the God of Death's divinity is entrusted to it. Note, only those who are recognized are qualified to use this mask. Bai Xiaowen rubbed the tough leather mask and pasted it on his face. He was so handsome, so there was no reason that he could not be recognized. A cool feeling came over him. Bai Xiaowen had never worn a facial mask before, but it was probably similar to a girl's facial mask. Soon, the cool air dissipated, and Bai Xiaowen received a notification. Death's look has resonated with the special item, Black Soul Stone. Do you want to absorb it? Bai Xiaowen's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately chose yes. The Black Soul Stone was like a sandstone that had been weathered. It slowly scattered into gravel and scattered in all directions. When Bai Xiaowen checked the Death's look again, he found that all the functions of the Black Soul Stone had been transferred to the mask. The Return of the Dead skill, the 8-layer enhancement scroll, and various enhancement options, including the options that had been unlocked, were all retained. It was worth mentioning that the Death's Look was not a piece of equipment, but a special item. When Bai Xiaowen took off the mask, he could still activate the Return of the Dead ability. Moreover, the Death's Look also added a new ability. You can consume soul essence to temporarily enhance one or more undead creatures. Your existence will form a level suppression on undead creatures. This effect will be greatly enhanced when you wear the Death's Look. You've acquired a skill, Dark Resurrection. Dark Resurrection. Beginner, you can consume soul essence to imprison the soul of a dead person in their corpse, allowing them to resurrect and fight for you, retaining 100% of their attribute value. The stronger the resurrected dead person was when they were alive, the more soul essence you consume. Note 1. You can only maintain the dark resurrection of one dead person at a time. Note 2. You cannot forcibly resurrect a target whose total attributes are higher than yours, unless the target's soul does not resist. Eye of Evolution. Eye of Evolution. Chapter 1426. Is it that powerful? Bai Xiaowen was slightly taken aback. Then, he said to himself, show me my current appearance. A beam of white light turned into a mirror, reflecting Bai Xiaowen's masked appearance. This mask was a little special. Perhaps it was because it was very thin, but Bai Xiaowen's every subtle expression could be seen on the mask, be it joy, anger, sorrow, or joy. However, Bai Xiaowen's entire temperament had changed. He had turned from a sunny and handsome person to a sinister and eerie one. Needless to say, when wearing the Grim Reaper's face, the charm of living beings would definitely plummet. As for undead creatures, well, Bai Xiaowen wasn't sure if they would be affected by the charm. Fortunately, the Grim Reaper's face wasn't a piece of equipment, so it didn't matter if it was worn or not. The only difference was that when wearing the Grim Reaper's face, Bai Xiaowen's level suppression on undead creatures would be greatly increased. Therefore, Bai Xiaowen took off the Grim Reaper's face and put it in his storage space. Not long after, his teammates woke up from their inheritance state. Now, their equipment was automatically taken off and floated in front of them. The rules of the spiritual realm automatically transformed into a set of clothes to avoid the embarrassment of being exposed. Everyone sighed with emotion. The transformation of an evolver was too strange. It was as if they had completed a transition of life form. Are we still considered humans now? Li Shi suddenly asked this question. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, that depends on how you define human. However, there's no need to think about such a complicated philosophical question. As long as you're still you and I'm still me, that's enough. After a pause, Bai Xiaowen asked everyone to check the notifications of the spiritual realm's rules. His teammates started discussing about the equipment conversion crystal. Li Shi said, fortunately, I left my red leaf sword and old Han's waist anchor chain to Xiaojun. I'm afraid it's not worth it to convert these two family heirlooms into crystals. Bai Xiaowen nodded and said, let's look at the conversion ratio first. While converting the spiritual crystals, Bai Xiaowen realized that only the equipment he wore when he chose to become an evolved human would be included in the conversion. As for the equipment he didn't wear, it couldn't be converted into crystals. It could only be temporarily sealed and left in the storage space to collect dust. That was also why Al made them wear the best equipment they had. Bai Xiaowen tried the +7 Desert Eagle and chose to convert it. The Desert Eagle turned into weathered sand particles and disappeared. After the hazy white light, a small pile of thumb-sized circular crystals floated in front of Bai Xiaowen. Obviously, these round crystals were spirit crystals. There were 16 of them in total. In other words, the +7 gold weapon, Desert Eagle, was worth 16 spiritual crystals. Then, the +owl, the necklace of the +4 owl necklace next was the +4 ghost shoulder pads, which only had 8 pieces. When Bai Xiaowen tried to convert the dark gold equipment +4 Emperor's crown, the white light turned into a waterfall, and a large number of crystals appeared. 180 crystals. After trying out a few pieces of equipment, Bai Xiaowen already had an idea of what to do. He smiled and said, I can roughly figure out the conversion mechanism. A piece of gold equipment with a powerful skill should be worth around 10 spiritual crystals. Normal gold equipment should be worth around 5 spiritual crystals, and the price should be halved. On this basis, +4 upgrade will add 3 crystals, +7 upgrade will add 6 crystals. If it's below +4, it should only add 1 crystal. Qiao Rui nodded and said, it's relatively easy to upgrade from 1 to 3, so 1 crystal will be given. Then, 2 crystals will be given for upgrading from 4 to 6. Finally, 3 crystals will be given for upgrading from 7 to 9. This calculation is the same as Captain's. Cecilia said, dark gold equipment obviously exceeds this standard by a lot. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, dark gold equipment is about 10 times more valuable. This is probably in line with the rarity of dark gold equipment. I just don't know how the set is calculated. Okay, don't just stand there. Convert the equipment to crystals. The teammates were a little reluctant. After all, the equipment had been with them for a long time. They had some feelings for it. However, they couldn't do anything about it. The equipment was useless to them. Li Shi converted the set of 2 daggers. Han Su converted the set of 3 pieces of the King of the Deep Sea set. The final conclusion was that the 2 pieces of the set were worth double the original value, and the 3 pieces were worth triple the original value. Soon, everyone finished converting their equipment. Bai Xiaowen's equipment was the best. The 3 pieces of the Summon Creature Butcher and Keats equipment couldn't be worn anymore. They needed to be converted. In the end, he received 1,246 crystals. The rest of his teammates each received 200 to 300 spiritual crystals. The big difference was mainly because the value of dark gold equipment was much higher than gold equipment. Bai Xiaowen had several pieces of dark gold equipment. Then, the Spirit Realm's rules gave another notification. Everyone's team relationship had been automatically cancelled. The item Black Blade's Oath was automatically converted into 120 crystals. When everyone was about to gather the crystals with Bai Xiaowen waved his hand and said, wait a minute. Now that there's no team relationship and no team shared space, it's not appropriate to gather the team's assets with me. You must prepare some crystals. Qiao Rui agreed. It seems that we have to explore the evolved person's plane by ourselves. Bai Xiaowen nodded. That's right. We'll be facing a class test next. Judging from the name, it should be similar to Shi's situation when she was promoted to a hero class. It's a solo exploration. There's no way to go in together. Maybe after the class test, we'll enter the legendary Star Alliance. What's the Star Alliance like? Without a team, how will we meet in the Star Alliance? Li Shi asked. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, wait a minute. Bai Xiaowen then said to the Spirit Realm's rules, check the coordinates of my territory. Under the starry sky, the virtual map of the territory that Bai Xiaowen had drawn in the 3 kingdoms plane slowly appeared. Soon, the virtual map shrank and turned into a palm-sized token made of an unknown material. It fell into Bai Xiaowen's palm. Spirit Realm's rules, based on your performance during the unification process, you've obtained a territory. This is your territory token. You can choose to fuse with this token and obtain complete authority over your territory. Bai Xiaowen immediately chose to fuse with it. The token made of an unknown material was like a puddle of water that quickly seeped into Bai Xiaowen's palm and disappeared. Bai Xiaowen immediately felt that there was a lot of information in his mind. He had gained a lot of new authority. Among them was the authority to create territory coordinates. Bai Xiaowen expended some elemental energy and operated according to his authority. Soon, a faintly glowing ball appeared in his palm. It contained the information of his territory's coordinates. Then, Bai Xiaowen gave 4 territory coordinates to his 4 teammates and instructed them not to easily spread the coordinates of their territories. The 4 teammates started the class test one after another. A glowing door appeared in front of each of them, and they entered separately. Bai Xiaowen watched his 4 teammates, or rather, his former teammates leave. His gaze fell on Jinmi, who had been standing behind him and was as quiet as a jade sculpture. Chapter 1427. I've been promoted to an evolver, so your rank should follow me. Have there been any changes? Bai Xiaowen asked. Jinmi shook her head. After living on Earth for half a year and following Bai Xiaowen and the other awakened, Jinmi had changed a lot. Not only did she learn to simplify Chinese characters, but she also knew about the awakened, evolvers, and some non-confidential information. Jinmi was now half a modern person. Hearing Bai Xiaowen's question, Jinmi showed her personal panel to Bai Xiaowen. Just like before, it was still Feng Yi's special skill and the 4 dance auxiliary skills. Husband, I envy Sister Li very much. I also want to help you, Jinmi said softly. Bai Xiaowen comforted her, don't worry. The result of my inquiry was that as long as I advance, you will also advance. You haven't advanced yet. It should be because I haven't completed the profession test. Wait for me. Bai Xiaowen immediately said in his mind, activate the profession test. The spirit world's rules prompted, it has been detected that you are practicing 2 profession classics at the same time. The difficulty of the profession test will be increased. It has been detected that you own a territory. The profession test has been switched to Lord Mode. After completing the Lord Mode test, you will obtain the authority to exchange for the people of the territory. You can choose different test backgrounds, forests, oceans, towns, deserts, and cemeteries. Bai Xiaowen was a little confused. After digesting the information about the Lord Mode, he asked tentatively, will different backgrounds affect the development of my territory? The spirit world's rules remained silent. Jinmi saw these messages and whispered, husband, it may be that different terrains are chosen, and different types of enemies will appear. Bai Xiaowen nodded, it's very likely. Then, the forests may correspond to the elves, the oceans to the Nagas and the Nagas, the towns to the humans, and the deserts to the undead. Jinmi said, after you complete the test, you can exchange for the people of the territory to develop our territory. From the looks of it, whatever kind of people you want, you have to choose a corresponding background. Smart. Bai Xiaowen smiled and asked, are you afraid of ghosts? Jinmi's expression didn't change at all. I'm not afraid as long as my husband is here. All right. Bai Xiaowen smiled and clicked on the last cemetery background. A slightly gloomy light door opened with a swoosh. Bai Xiaowen said, I'll use my lord's teleportation authority to teleport you to my territory. Don't resist. Jinmi nodded. Don't be afraid. The territory is deserted now, but I will soon bring the first batch of people here to start construction, Bai Xiaowen said. Jinmi nodded again. Bai Xiaowen raised his hand and placed it on Jinmi's back. A beam of white light engulfed Jinmi, and she was teleported to the territory. Then, Bai Xiaowen stepped into the Lord's trial ground with the cemetery background. This, really is a graveyard. Bai Xiaowen looked around. This place was like an isolated island, with dilapidated fences, rusty iron gates, and scattered mausoleums. The sky was dark, and the visibility was very low. From time to time, skeleton soldiers patrolled. Bai Xiaowen used insight on one of the skeleton soldiers. It was worth mentioning that Bai Xiaowen didn't receive a notification that his psionic points would be deducted. Xiao once said that he didn't need psionic points to evolve. After discussing with his teammates, Bai Xiaowen left most of his psionic points to Xiao Jun. Each of them carried 100,000 psionic points as pocket money in case of emergency. As a result, after evolving, the 100,000 psionic points left by Bai Xiaowen seemed to be frozen. The free use of insight this time was the evidence. Only level 1? Total attributes of 20? Bai Xiaowen rubbed his eyes. Was this an evolutionary trial? Even a quasi-awakened hunter's trial task is more difficult than this. Bai Xiaowen pushed open the rusty gate and walked over. The creaking sound attracted the attention of the level 1 skeleton soldier, and its skull turned around. Then, it knelt down. Rank suppression. Even without the Grim Reaper's visage, Bai Xiaowen's suppression of this low-level skeleton soldier was still enough. Bai Xiaowen stepped forward and punched the skeleton soldier, turning it into a skeleton. The result of insight is correct. It's indeed the weakest skeleton soldier. Bai Xiaowen saw some skeleton archers, zombies, and other creatures in the surrounding wasteland. They were around level 3 to 5. Note that the level 3 to 5 here were actually equivalent to a level 3 to 5 awakened. They still posed no threat to Bai Xiaowen. And these creatures, without exception, chose to kneel down in front of Bai Xiaowen. They were still suppressed by rank. Bai Xiaowen was too lazy to kill these cannon fodder. He had realized that the real content of the trial was probably not these stragglers. His gaze was cast to the tombs in the cemetery. The first tomb after entering the door is you. Bai Xiaowen strode in. As the cold wind blew, two skeletons wandered aimlessly in the dark mausoleum passageway ahead, emitting cracking sounds. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. He could feel that the aura of these two wandering skeletons was obviously different. Insight, use. Wandering skeleton, level 13, race, undead/bone race, attributes, strength 80, agility 33, constitution 60, spirit 21, health, 100%, spiritual power, 700, a simple 5 elements prompt, but the name and race were still useless information. What the hell was health? What was spiritual power? For a moment, Bai Xiaowen could not figure out the bloodline of these wandering skeletons. Looking at their level, they should be equivalent to an evolver monster. Their strength was unknown, but I'm a dignified Lord-level evolver, a dual-profession overlord, and a godslayer. I can't be defeated by two skeleton soldiers, right? With this thought in mind, Bai Xiaowen sent out the Shadow Assassin. It entered stealth mode and quietly crept over. However, just as the Shadow Assassin was 5 meters away from the wandering skeletons, Bai Xiaowen saw one of the wandering skeletons suddenly turn around. With a flash of black gas, it pounced in front of the Shadow Assassin and pulled out a bone claw. It really turned around and pulled out a claw. Crack! The Shadow Assassin was killed. The corners of Bai Xiaowen's eyes twitched. His brain worked quickly as he received the battle information notification from the spiritual realm. The wandering skeleton's normal attack caused 359 mixed damage, 69 points of damage overflow, to the Shadow Assassin. The Shadow Assassin is dead. The 359 mixed damage included 3 types of damage: physical damage, shadow damage, and true damage. Physical damage came from normal claw attack, shadow damage came from spiritual power attachment, and true damage came from rank suppression. Chapter 1428. Bai Xiaowen immediately summoned the Wrath Claw. The Wrath Claw was taller and stronger than before, like an adult water buffalo. Bai Xiaowen glanced at it. The Wrath Claw was level 10. It's still at the awakened level. Bai Xiaowen frowned. Combined with the fact that Jinmi didn't evolve, he understood. Currently, Death's Look had completely absorbed the Black Soul Stone. But it was important to remember that the summoned creatures in the Black Soul Stone were not evolved yet. Their attributes and skills hadn't changed. It was inevitable that he would be suppressed by an evolver-level creature. What Bai Xiaowen didn't know was that the difficulty of the dungeon he was facing was obviously higher than that of a normal newly evolved person. Because he had 2 professions. And a lord. If you want to wear a crown, you have to bear its weight. Other newly awakened people would encounter monsters of level 11 at most in the profession test. It was only 1 level higher, so the suppression effect would naturally be greatly reduced. It was almost negligible. However, the lowest level skeletons that Bai Xiaowen encountered were all level 13. Bai Xiaowen took a deep breath. He didn't panic. He had already checked. The trial ground was only a place to help awakened people adapt to the power of evolved people. When they encountered fatal damage, the trial would automatically end. There was no trial failure or even death. It was just a matter of whether the results were good or bad. Bai Xiaowen took a step forward and stood side by side with the Wrath Claw. The two wandering skeletons' feet flashed with a black light, and they pounced with an agility that didn't conform to common sense. And in Bai Xiaowen's vision, the two wandering skeletons' spiritual energy value decreased by a small amount again. Bai Xiaowen clenched his fist and gathered his strength in place. He mobilized his elemental energy. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 21 points of elemental energy were attached to his fist. The first wandering skeleton was intercepted by the Wrath Claw. When the second wandering skeleton waved its claw at Bai Xiaowen, a huge monster descended from the sky and blocked its claw. It was the Butcher. The Butcher's decay was activated, but the surface of the wandering skeleton's body was constantly emitting a black light. Its health value did not decrease at all. Clearly, it was almost immune to the decay toxin. Then, Butcher suffered a terrible claw. Without the Venomfang Priest set, Butcher lost the powerful damage reduction effect from before, and he still had to take the true damage from the rank suppression. Moreover, Bai Xiaowen suspected that even if there was an awakened Priest Venomfang set, would the set effect be weakened on evolvers? It was also an unknown factor. After all, the most frightening thing about an evolved being was that they had a special type of energy, such as spiritual power. Fortunately, the Butcher was tankier than the Shadow Assassin. The wandering skeleton's claw only left a large bloody hole in the Butcher's body. Yellowish-white fat flowed out, but it wasn't fatal. Bai Xiaowen, on the other hand, took advantage of Butcher blocking this attack to take a step forward and punch out with his essence force wrapped in a fist. Bang! It was all thanks to Butcher's physical body blocking that the wandering skeletons couldn't dodge or defend in time. Voila! The health points of the wandering skeletons instantly collapsed and fell to around 30%. Elemental energy had a demon-destroying effect, which had a restraining effect on undead creatures. Moreover, this was a punch that took 3 seconds to charge up. Although the result seemed good, Bai Xiaowen didn't smile at all. He originally thought that this punch would be enough to kill one of the wandering skeletons. Fortunately, this punch smashed the wandering skeleton's chest and shattered a section of its spine. The movement of the wandering skeletons slowed down significantly. On the other side, the Wrath Claw was contending with the first wandering skeletons. However, the opponent's attacks with the support of spiritual power far exceeded its own agility and speed, causing the Wrath Claw to be at a disadvantage. If it wasn't for the passive skill rune armor, the Wrath Claw wouldn't have been able to withstand it. Bai Xiaowen raised his hand, and 10 ghoul archers appeared behind him and shot arrows in unison. After a round of arrows, the result was dismal. The health points of the wandering skeletons in front of Bai Xiaowen dropped by less than 5%. However, some damage was better than nothing. The ghoul archers were long-range attackers, so they wouldn't be attacked. Bai Xiaowen threw 2 more punches. He realized that ordinary punches without elemental energy could hardly penetrate the layer of black gas on the surface of the wandering skeletons. The damage caused was negligible. In the end, he forcefully charged his elemental energy fist for 1 second and smashed the wandering skeletons into pieces. In Bai Xiaowen's vision, the 20% plus health points of the wandering skeletons were instantly reduced to 0. Could it be that all evolved monsters don't have health points? Only health points? Bai Xiaowen looked at the wandering skeletons that were fighting the Wrath Claw. He tapped the space between his eyebrows, injected his spiritual power, and activated deterrence. However, the deterrence, which had always been successful, also lost its effect. Like a gentle breeze, the wandering skeletons only paused for a moment before regaining its ability to move again. I don't believe it. My basic priority is 7 points. It's definitely much higher than this. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes, and a talisman appeared in his palm. He continued to inject his spiritual power into the bewitching talisman. It was ineffective. The wandering skeletons used a bit of strength and broke free from the effects of the bewitching talisman. The Wrath Claw's voice sounded in Bai Xiaowen's mind. Master, what are you doing, meow? If you continue playing, I'll die. Bai Xiaowen suppressed his doubts and quickly stepped forward to fight the wandering skeletons together with the Wrath Claw and the Butcher. At the same time, Bai Xiaowen summoned the Necromancer and the Queen of Banshees to increase their long-range damage. After expending a Herculean effort, they finally hammered the wandering skeletons to death. However, the Wrath Claw and Bai Xiaowen were also riddled with injuries. The Butcher was even more miserable. There were 2 huge bloody holes in his chest and stomach, and he had lost his ability to move. Bai Xiaowen once again confirmed that in the world of evolved humans, health points were closely related to one's ability to move. For example, the Butcher's health points had already hit rock bottom, so his ability to move was naturally greatly reduced. Another example was the wandering skeletons that were killed first. Is this a new rule? It feels even closer to reality. Bai Xiaowen heaved a sigh of relief and sat cross-legged on the ground. The Spirit Realm rule notified him. You have killed the wandering skeletons. You have received 1 trial point. The same notification appeared twice. His current score was 2 points. Bai Xiaowen rummaged through the 2 wandering skeletons' broken bones, but he didn't find anything like a treasure chest. There were 2 possibilities. Either the trial ground only gave points and didn't drop any loot, or the wandering skeleton's score was too low and shouldn't drop any loot. Bai Xiaowen heaved a sigh of relief. He closed his eyes and first read the first part of the Art of War in his Sea of Consciousness. According to his understanding, the difficulty of the trial ground was beyond the ability of an awakened. Therefore, he should find a solution from the class-specific books. In the first chapter of the Art of War, aside from the obscure and profound training sections, there were 2 skills that were shown: Army Might and Army Spirit. Chapter 1429. However, the skill description was very simple and did not contain any detailed information. Army Prestige, Commanding Skill. Consumes elemental energy to display the majestic aura of your troops to intimidate the enemy. Army Spirit, Commanding Skill. Passive Skill. Your troops will not flee due to low morale. Consumes elemental energy to activate the Army Spirit skill. Your troops' morale will increase by 10 points, their sense of pain will decrease by 50%, and their health will decrease by 50%. Bai Xiaowen could not figure it out for a while. The main reason was that Bai Xiaowen was not familiar with the combat style of evolved humans. Although Army Prestige and Army Spirit sounded cool, he did not know how effective they were. Regardless, these 2 commanding skills would not be of any help to the current situation. Bai Xiaowen originally wanted to see if the first level of the Great Void Scripture would be able to turn the situation around. That's not right. A normal control-type evolved human would not be able to obtain a manual for a second profession. He would only be able to seek help from the manual for the initial profession, the Art of War. If that's the case, the Art of War must be able to turn the situation around. Bai Xiaowen dismissed the idea of looking at the Great Void Scripture. Instead, he focused on studying the first chapter of the Art of War. There was no time limit for the training ground. Furthermore, there were summoned creatures like the Wrath Claw guarding the training ground. Therefore, Bai Xiaowen still had the ability to calm down and study the manual. It was just like when he studied the Taiping's Essentials. Although the words were obscure and difficult to understand, after reading through them, a wave of knowledge and understanding would flow into his mind. Bai Xiaowen unknowingly entered a state of cultivation. The elemental energy in his body began to circulate. The elemental energy was like a crawling tortoise, circulating along Bai Xiaowen's meridians inch by inch. After becoming an evolved human, Bai Xiaowen's meridians had already been connected. However, this was the first time the elemental energy threads were circulating in his meridians. After an unknown period of time, Bai Xiaowen's elemental energy finally completed a full cycle. Phew, Bai Xiaowen opened his eyes. I am now a true evolved human. Bai Xiaowen opened his palm, and a ball of light surged according to his will. Then, with a thought, it disappeared. With regards to elemental energy, Bai Xiaowen was finally able to control it at will. He raised his hand and punched out. A white light flashed on the surface of his fist. Now that the elemental energy was attached to the fist, the accumulation time was greatly reduced. Furthermore, essence energy was not only used for attacking, but could also be used for other purposes. Bai Xiaowen stood up and tried to channel his elemental energy into his legs. He started to gallop around the Wrath Claw. 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds, Wrath Claw tilted its head curiously. Master, you don't have a tail. Don't chase it. Bai Xiaowen stopped. The Wrath Claw demonstrated. It turned its head back, stuck its butt up, and chased after its tail in circles. It looked very happy. Bai Xiaowen decided to ignore the Wrath Claw for the time being. My instantaneous running speed just now was faster than Xu Yi's at full strength. Bai Xiaowen was slightly shocked. His agility was only 33 points. Now, Bai Xiaowen understood why the 2 wandering skeletons, despite their low agility, could pounce on him so quickly. Furthermore, their attacks were so fast that even Bai Xiaowen's shadow assassin could not avoid them. All of these were the effects of the special energy. Now, Bai Xiaowen had completed the first cycle of the elemental energy in his body. He also had a preliminary control over it. Furthermore, the elemental energy that Tai Gong's Art of War bestowed upon him was definitely much more powerful than the spiritual energy of the wandering skeletons. After all, it was an occupation manual with a 7-point priority. This could be seen from the damage that was added to the elemental energy. Every point of elemental energy would add 30 points of damage, and it was the damage of evil. This was something that the spiritual energy of the wandering skeletons could not compare to. From the battle just now, Bai Xiaowen had already calculated that the spiritual energy of the wandering skeletons would add about 10 points of damage per point. When used for defense, it would also absorb about 10 points of damage. It was similar to the internal energy of the Sword Song dimension. However, the first chapter of Tai Gong's Art of War bestowed upon Bai Xiaowen not only the control of elemental energy, but also a lot of knowledge about commanding. For example, how to rely on the trend of the ley lines to form an array. If he mastered the array knowledge of oneness of man and nature, it would be much more powerful than Zhang He's array change overlord skill in the 3 kingdoms dimension. Other than that, there were also tricks on how to change formations in battle and how to break the enemy's various formations. It could be said to be extensive and profound. Even Bai Xiaowen's super brain could not digest it all at once. He could only study it slowly later. The most important thing was the knowledge and method of forming a personal guard seed seal. According to Tai Gong's Art of War, the personal guard was the foundation of a commander. It was the most important thing. Without a group of loyal and powerful personal guards, the commander would not be able to gain a foothold on the battlefield, let alone give orders. With a personal guard unit as the heart and elite direct subordinates as the skeleton, and then commanding thousands of troops, naturally, one would be able to command them like an extension of one's arm. There would be no hindrance in passing orders to the various troops. Moreover, when the battle situation was chaotic, the personal guard unit would also be needed to stand up and act as the cornerstone to reorganize the battle formation. Seed seal is to transform one's elemental energy into an imprint and plant it on a soldier, turning him into a personal guard. In addition to increasing the strength of the personal guard, it can also achieve a telepathic connection between the personal guard and the commander, and they will never betray each other. The extent to which the personal guard's strength increases depends on the commander. However, the prerequisite for the seed seal is that the target soldier is 100% loyal and obedient to the commander. Bai Xiaowen reviewed the annotations of Tai Gong's Art of War regarding the seed seal. Tai Gong's Art of War also gave a series of training methods to increase one's prestige and aura, charm, win over the hearts of the people, and make the soldiers obedient to him. Bai Xiaowen pondered for a while. For me, I can plant an elemental energy imprint on a summoned creature. There will definitely be no problem with the summoned creature's loyalty and obedience to me. Moreover, after the seed seal, the summoned creature should be able to evolve into a creature at the level of an evolver. After all, I am now considered half an evolver. After some consideration, Bai Xiaowen decided to experiment with a ghoul archer. According to the knowledge in Tai Gong's Art of War, he channeled his elemental energy and formed a simple symbol imprint on his palm. Then, he pressed it on the skull of the ghoul archer. The elemental energy imprint merged with the skull of the ghoul archer. Immediately, the two clusters of soul flames in its eye sockets shone brightly. The originally pale soul flames actually turned a blazing white. Rustle, rustle, rustle. The bones of the ghoul archer's entire body fell to the ground. At the same time, cracking sounds could be heard. The ghoul archer actually grew out of thin air. Its originally thin and withered body had become much sturdier. The seed seal was a success. Chapter 1430. The current appearance of the undead archers was very different from that of ordinary skeleton archers at the awakened stage. However, it was a little similar to the wandering skeleton he had just killed, especially that blazing white soul fire. Bai Xiaowen looked at the ghoul archer's template. Ghoul archer, level 11, race, ghoul/bone race, attributes, STR 42, DX 55, Con 40, INT 35, bonuses included, health, 100%, spiritual power, 500, the ghoul archer's attributes have increased by so much. Bai Xiaowen clearly remembered that its attributes at level 8 were about 10 points lower than its current attributes. Such a huge increase was definitely not possible with the ghoul archer's attribute growth of 4 ones. Perhaps it was due to the seed seal. However, from the battle just now, the attributes were not the main point. The main point was the special energy called spiritual power. A level 11 ghoul archer's spiritual power was 500 points. It seemed that this was the starting point of a standard evolved creature. A level 13 wandering skeleton archer's spiritual power was 700 points. It seemed to make sense that it would gain 100 points every time it leveled up. No matter what, the seed seal ability had raised Bai Xiaowen's summon creatures from the awakened level to the evolved level. Moreover, their attributes had increased by a lot. Finally, Bai Xiaowen had the qualifications to continue the trial. After the experiment was successful, Bai Xiaowen continued with the seed seal. Wrath Claw, Death Knight, Queen of Banshees, Butcher. The seed seals were placed according to the strength of the summoned creatures. According to the art of war, there was a limit to the number of personal guards a commander could have at one time. First of all, the maintenance of each elemental energy mark required 10 points of the commander's elemental energy. Secondly, even if the commander's elemental energy was limitless, with Bai Xiaowen's current mastery of the first chapter of the Art of War, it was impossible for him to continuously recruit personal guards. This was a double restriction. Fortunately, after Bai Xiaowen planted the last ghoul archer, the number of personal guards still did not reach the maximum. This meant that the maximum number of personal guards he could have now was more than 10 people. He was not sure how many there were, so he had to figure it out himself. All the summoned creatures were planted with seals, completing the transition from awakened creature to evolved creature. However, the laws of the spiritual realm also sent a notification, detected that your personal guards are mainly composed of the undead race. The undead army has no morale and no sense of pain. Your control skill Army Spirit is ineffective against it. The undead army is a natural deterrent to life forms. Your commanding skill Army Prestige has a slight increase in its effect on living beings. Bai Xiaowen frowned slightly. It seemed like Army Spirit and Army Might were useless in this trial ground graveyard. Even if they left the training ground, their Army Soul skills would be useless. If he wanted to fully utilize the power of the control skill, he would have to recruit a group of living personal guards. Of course, turning the summoned creatures into personal guards was just a stopgap measure to gain points in the trial grounds. After leaving the cemetery, Bai Xiaowen could retract his elemental energy imprint and recruit new bodyguards. At this time, Bai Xiaowen also understood that the awakened and evolver stages were similar in terms of career choices. Control-type evolved ones usually used to be summoners or had at least 1 or 2 summoning skills. This was because when the summoner profession was unified, they usually commanded a group of subordinates to fight. It was rare for them to personally fight. When the laws of the spiritual realm gave out the profession books, they would definitely take into account the unified performance. After entering the trial grounds, control-type evolved ones could use an ability similar to seed seals to upgrade their summoned creatures to evolved ones. This way, they would have the basic qualifications to participate in the trial. Because the equipment and items of the awakened ones could not be used, the only creatures that could be upgraded were the summoned creatures in their skill bars. Normally, there would only be 3 to 4 to 6 of them. There would not be a heaven-defying number. However, the laws of the spiritual realm did not calculate that Bai Xiaowen's Grim Reaper's countenance could absorb black soul stones. This was a small bug that could be traced back to the Grim Reaper Nigar. Now, Bai Xiaowen had more than 10 level 11 evolved creatures to participate in the trial. In this case, so what if the difficulty of the dual profession trial increased? So what if it was Lord mode? I, Bai Ritian, will break through the trial grounds today. Bai Xiaowen took out the Grim Reaper's countenance and pasted it on his face. Suddenly, a gloomy aura emerged. The Wrath Claw shook its tail uneasily. However, Kits cried out in surprise, "Boss, you're even more handsome. You're almost surpassing me." I'll continue to work hard." Bai Xiaowen felt the cold touch of the Grim Reaper's countenance. At this time, he could already form a considerable level suppression against undead creatures. However, the people around him were his personal guards and allies, so they were not negatively affected by the level suppression. When they encountered the wandering skeletons earlier, Bai Xiaowen did not immediately put on the Grim Reaper's countenance because he wanted to feel out the strength of the evolved ones. Now, however, there was no need to hide it. Bai Xiaowen led the army of summoned creatures forward. After walking through a tunnel, 2 more wandering skeletons appeared in front of them. One was level 12, the other was level 13. Bai Xiaowen gave the 2 wandering skeletons a death stare. Although the 2 wandering skeletons did not kneel when they saw Bai Xiaowen, their movements were clearly much slower, as if they were afraid of him. These 2 wandering skeletons had no intelligence, so naturally, they had no feelings. The reason why he was cowering in fear was because he felt that his soul was being suppressed. "Attack!" Bai Xiaowen ordered. Since he had obtained complete authority over the Black Soul Stone, Bai Xiaowen's summoned creatures were now given basic self-awareness. They could freely choose to attack and wear equipment, evolved ones. The melee creatures pounced forward, and the undead archers fired randomly. Why is the damage wrong? Bai Xiaowen was a little puzzled. The undead archers' physical damage had only increased by a little after their evolution. Not only the undead archers, but the other summoned creatures' damage was relatively average. Fortunately, there was no level suppression, so when they received damage, they did not receive any real damage. Only one person was an exception, and that was Kits. Kits waved his claws, the tips of his claws carrying a faint black aura. He yelled, "Awesome, too awesome!" With a swipe of his claws, the black aura on the surface of a wandering skeleton was broken. With a crack, 2 of its ribs were broken, and its health value plummeted by more than 10%. Bai Xiaowen suddenly realized something. Spiritual power. It was the most important means of attack for evolved ones. Without spiritual power attached to their attacks, what was the difference between them and awakened ones? Just now, when Bai Xiaowen ordered the summoned creatures to attack, he did not think to use spiritual power. Naturally, the effect was weak. Kits had previously cultivated the Blood God Sutra, Pseudo, and had experience using true Qi. Now, using spiritual power was naturally a walk in the park for him. Chapter 1431. Use spiritual energy to attack. Bai Xiaowen issued a new order. However, the summoned creatures were collectively dumbfounded. Even their attacking speed was much slower. Bai Xiaowen and the summoned creatures were telepathic and immediately understood the reason. It was just like when he had just obtained elemental energy in the Three Kingdoms plane. He was unfamiliar with using elemental energy and needed to accumulate energy for a period of time. The summoned creatures' combat accomplishments and intelligence were much lower than Bai Xiaowen's. They wanted to use spiritual energy freely after just obtaining it. Impossible. In fact, they couldn't even use spiritual energy. Bai Xiaowen sighed. He thought that after giving them their own consciousness, they wouldn't need a spiritual trainer to control them carefully. Now, it seemed that he had to return to his old profession. The problem was that Bai Xiaowen had only just learned how to use special energy. It was really difficult to multitask and control multiple summon creatures to use their spiritual energy to attack. However, Bai Xiaowen was still confident. His learning speed was much faster than that of ordinary evolvers. In addition, the summoned creatures had their own consciousness. Bai Xiaowen could control them and use their spiritual energy to fight. It was equivalent to giving them hands-on guidance. Even if they learned slowly, there would come a time when they could use spiritual energy freely. Bai Xiaowen tried multitasking. After a series of experiments, he had a rough idea. He could now control at most 4 summoned creatures and use their spiritual energy to attack. Although the 4 summoned creatures were inconspicuous, if someone who had experienced it knew about it, they would definitely exclaim that it was abnormal. It was already very difficult for ordinary evolvers to use their own energy to attack when they had just advanced, not to mention controlling 4 summoned creatures at the same time. Otherwise, the spirit realm wouldn't have set up a training ground. The purpose of the training ground was to allow newly advanced evolvers to familiarize themselves with the new fighting style of special energy battle. Bai Xiaowen wanted to try controlling the 4 main forces, such as the Wrath Claw, the Butcher, and the Death Knight, to teach them how to use their spiritual energy. However, he quickly discovered that these high-level combatants were much more difficult to control because their fighting styles were more complicated. Bai Xiaowen was still not very familiar with it, so he could only try to control the 4 undead archers. That was simple. The skeletal archers only had one way of attacking, and that was to shoot arrows. He used his spiritual energy to attach it to the arrow. The skeletal archers' bone arrows were covered in a layer of black gas. Whoosh! Black chi pierced through the air. 2 of the 4 arrows hit their target, a thick skeleton that was wandering around. The wandering skeleton's body was covered in black gas. It was obvious that it had relied on spiritual energy to absorb part of the damage. Then, with 2 popping sounds, the bone arrows hit. Although the damage was still very high, it was much more effective than before. Bai Xiaowen was intentionally tempering himself. He had kits stand at the front, only defending and not attacking. Then, the 4 meticulously controlled skeletal archers shot one arrow after another, attacking with spiritual energy. So far, all he had encountered were wandering skeletons. They should be the weakest evolvers in the trial grounds. He took advantage of this opportunity to train his control skills and give the skeletal archers more time to learn. Only then would he be able to fight stronger evolvers when he encountered them. The team pushed all the way into the depths of the mausoleum. Clearly, this mausoleum was filled with wandering skeletons. The highest was only level 13. Gradually, the number of skeletal archers that Bai Xiaowen could control increased. From 4 skeletal archers, he had expanded to 5, then 6. As for the first 4 skeletal archers, as their soul flames danced, they gradually became familiar with this single-target method of shooting arrows with spiritual energy. However, the first one to achieve a breakthrough was not these 4 skeletal archers, but Delifa the soul-witching demoness. Whoosh! Delifa stabbed out with a spiritual spear. The tip of the spear carried a faint black gas. It directly pierced through the black gas defense of a wandering skeleton. The wandering skeleton's health had already fallen below 30%. Delifa's spear pierced through its throat and killed it instantly. Bai Xiaowen made a soft sound of surprise. Delifa, why did you learn it without teaching? Delifa smiled. Master, I seem to have remembered something. I must have experienced this method of using spiritual energy many times before. That's why it's awakened my instincts. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. Delifa only remembered that her original form was the Valkyrie. He had long forgotten the specifics. It seemed that she was also a demoness with a story. She was not as simple as being the former servant of the death god Nagori. Nagori called Delifa by her full name, Sid Delifa. Bai Xiaowen did not seem to care, but he had always remembered it in his heart. However, now that Delifa had awakened the method of using spiritual energy in battle, it was a good thing for Bai Xiaowen. Delifa, you and Keats will be at the front. Demonstrate to the others how to use spiritual energy to attack. After Bai Xiaowen finished speaking, he kicked the Wrath Claw's butt, making a metallic clang. Learn well. You're my #1 fighter. If you can't learn how to use spiritual energy to attack, what will become of you? The Wrath Claw howled and said with a bit of grievance, they're cheating. You still dare to talk back. Your vacation this month is gone. The Wrath Claw said, don't be like this, boss. I'll learn, okay? As time passed, Bai Xiaowen's trial points increased. His personal guards also grew stronger. When they reached the last large tomb, there were a total of 6 wandering skeletons. However, Bai Xiaowen had already taught the 6 ghoul archers how to use spiritual energy to attack. Although their movements were stiff and slow, they did not need Bai Xiaowen to teach them step by step. Bai Xiaowen then carefully controlled the remaining 4. This way, the 10 ghoul archers could use spiritual energy to shoot arrows at the same time. The strength of their firepower was guaranteed. Without much effort, Bai Xiaowen finished cleaning up the 6 wandering skeletons in the large tomb. His trial points had also risen to 50 points. It seems that the first tomb only has 50 wandering skeletons. Bai Xiaowen went back the way he came and walked out of the tomb, returning to the cemetery. Then, he followed the main path of the cemetery and entered the second tomb. Just as Bai Xiaowen thought, the monsters that appeared in the second tomb were even stronger. They were called Frost Rage Zombies. Although the Frost Rage Zombies' movements were a bit slower, they were very strong. Their spiritual energy attacks actually carried cold air, which would slow down the enemies they hit. After a few slowdowns, they would freeze. Fortunately, Keats and Delifa were worthy of being called top students. They actually learned how to use spiritual energy to protect themselves. A faint layer of black air lingered on the surface of their bodies, greatly weakening the effects of the Frost Rage Zombies' cold air. Bai Xiaowen had a guess. Could it be that the first tomb allowed new evolvers to learn energy attacks, and the second tomb allowed new evolvers to learn energy protection? These two should be the most basic ways to use energy. Chapter 1432. The Frost Rage Zombies were much stronger than the wandering skeletons. According to the template, they should be at the quasi-elite level. They had the attributes of an elite creature, but they were still far from being a true elite creature. Bai Xiaowen had the rank suppression brought about by Death's Visage, which could greatly reduce the attacking efficiency of the Frost Rage Zombies. In fact, this was also the reason why Bai Xiaowen chose the cemetery as the trial ground. It had a natural advantage to obtain more points. In addition, although the citizens of the undead race lacked creativity and passion, they were good at developing territories and building infrastructure. Undead that did not need to rest or eat were more like 007 than 996. Every time he killed a Frost Rage zombie, Bai Xiaowen would obtain 2 trial points. Moreover, he was gradually mastering the spiritual power attack of the ghoul archers. By the time he was halfway through the second tomb, all 10 ghoul archers had finished their training. Bai Xiaowen had also become more proficient in controlling summon creatures and releasing spiritual power attacks. This was also an improvement in his own use of elemental energy. It had to be mentioned here that whether it was Bai Xiaowen's elemental energy or the undead monster's spiritual power, they were all unique types of energy. The way they were channeled was in the same vein. Similarly, there was Li Shui, Han Su, and Cecilia's aura energy, as well as the magic power of magicians and the battle energy of Western warriors. The only difference was that there was a difference in the purity level of the energy, which would be reflected in the different basic priorities. Bai Xiaowen immediately tried to control the Shadow Assassin and other elite melee creatures. From the resurrection of the Shadow Assassin, Bai Xiaowen already knew that he had been in the trial ground for more than 12 hours. Bai Xiaowen could control 3 elite creatures at the beginning. He then slowly taught them step by step and channeled their spiritual power to attack. Soon, the team arrived at the last large tomb chamber. In this large tomb chamber, in addition to the 4 Frost Rage zombies, there was also a Frost Rage zombie leader. It had already reached the level of a level 13 elite evolved creature. Its spiritual energy value was as high as 1100 points, and every move it made was filled with power. Bai Xiaowen's deterrence and talisman skills were ineffective. He could only command his summoned creatures to divide and surround them. First, they would kill the 4 normal Frost Rage zombies one by one. Finally, they would surround and attack the leader. Keats and Delifa relied on their teamwork to barely block the Frost Rage zombie leader's attack. However, the coldness of the Frost Rage zombie leader was extremely overbearing. Even with the protection of spiritual energy, Keats and Delifa couldn't withstand it. They were frozen to the point of shivering, and their speed plummeted. They had no ability to attack at all. If it weren't for Bai Xiaowen's Grim Reaper's countenance suppressing the Frost Fury zombie to a certain extent, Keats and Delifa would never have been able to win. It wasn't until Bai Xiaowen freed up his hands and controlled the 10 Necromancer archers to fire a volley of spirit energy arrows that the health of the Frost Rage zombie leader was slowly whittled away. Finally, under Bai Xiaowen's control, the skeleton warrior raised its greatsword high. With a flash of black light, it split open the chest of the Frost Rage zombie leader. At the same time, the shadow assassin behind him thrust out his dagger. The dagger, which was covered in black gas, broke through the Frost Rage zombie leader's protective spiritual energy with difficulty and pierced through its rotten heart. The Frost Rage zombie leader fell. The skeleton warrior and the shadow assassin had finally finished their apprenticeship. Bai Xiaowen could now control the 3 Terror Knights to participate in the battle. The battle strength of his personal guards had increased by another level. After passing through the second tomb, Bai Xiaowen received another 100 trial points. His current total was 150 points. Bai Xiaowen rubbed his temples. His elemental energy and physical strength hadn't been used up much, but the mental fatigue was unavoidable. However, he couldn't delay for too long. Bai Xiaowen only rested for a short while before leading his team into the third tomb. In the third tomb, the monster that appeared was a level 13 Deathbone swordsman. With just one look, Bai Xiaowen determined that the Deathbone swordsman was equivalent to an elite-level creature. In other words, the weakest of the 50 Deathbone swordsmen in the third tomb was equivalent to the Frost Rage zombie leader in the second tomb. Bai Xiaowen thought for a moment. There seemed to be a total of 7 tombs? I, Bai Ritian, have such a bug-like starting ability, but it's starting to take a toll on me when I reach the third tomb. What kind of god is there to train in these 7 tombs? Bai Xiaowen muttered. Although he was joking, Bai Xiaowen still had a rough idea of what was going on. In fact, the battle potential of his team was very strong. They had 3 chief-level creatures. As long as they could grasp the way to use their energy, they would be able to display the battle strength of a level 11 Evolver leader, which would be 10 times stronger than now. For example, the Queen of Banshees had 1020 spiritual energy points. Even the Wrathclaw had 950 spiritual energy points. Bai Xiaowen had already concluded a new rule. The higher the total spiritual energy value, the stronger the explosive power of a single attack, and the faster the recovery speed. The first 2 Deathbone swordsmen had already put Bai Xiaowen's team in danger. This Deathbone swordsman actually knew a powerful sword technique. With the combination of spiritual energy and sword technique, his attacks were fast, accurate, and ruthless. With the combination of spiritual energy and footwork, he moved like a ghost. With the protection of spiritual energy, he would be unharmed even if he was hit by a few arrows. Keats howled. His attacks almost all missed, but the Deathbone swordsman could easily take advantage of his flaws and leave slash wounds on his body. On the other hand, Delifa seemed to have awakened some of the battle techniques he had when he was alive after suffering at the beginning. With a spiritual spear flying up and down, he was able to hold on for a while in a fight with the Deathbone swordsman. The spiritual world's laws prompted, your personal guard and summon creature, Delifa, has learned the spear mastery. Currently at entry level 3. When Bai Xiaowen saw this, he suddenly realized something. If the first mausoleum was to teach evolvers the method of energy attacks, the second mausoleum was to teach evolvers the technique of energy protection, and the third mausoleum was to teach evolvers the importance of combat specialties. It was obvious that these two Deathbone swordsmen definitely had an extremely powerful sword specialization. Perhaps they even had a sword specialization that surpassed advanced levels, such as specialist level. This was because Bai Xiaowen's Terror Knight felt even more pressure from the Deathbone swordsman than from Li Shi when he used the Tianzong swordsmanship. From how Delifa and the Deathbone swordsman were locked in battle, it could be seen that the Deathbone swordsman should also have an entry level 3 specialization, such as sword specialization. However, as a level 11 elite, Delifa's spiritual energy was only around 700. Compared to the level 13 elite Deathbone swordsman, his foundation was much weaker. As time went on, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. An important reason why the Deathbone swordsman was able to fight back and forth was that the Deathbone swordsman's level was suppressed by the Death God's appearance. However, as a level 13 elite creature, it wasn't too afraid of Bai Xiaowen, who was a level 10 evolver. Bai Xiaowen smiled wryly to himself. Energy attacks and body protection techniques were easy to learn. However, specializations couldn't be leveled up in a short period of time. It was impossible to raise it to the same level as a level 13 monster in the trial ground. Bai Xiaowen could only use a stupid method. The Terror Knights surrounded the two Deathbone swordsmen and limited their movement space. They relied on their numbers to surround and kill them. Each Deathbone swordsman gave Bai Xiaowen 4 points. From the looks of it, I'm confident that I can clear the third tomb. Bai Xiaowen thought to himself. They usually appear in groups of 2 or 3. I'm bullying them with numbers and the level suppression of Death God's appearance. It should be enough to deal with them. Chapter 1433. Half an hour later. Bai Xiaowen's personal guard squad was facing 6 Deathbone swordsmen. It was a complete mess. I'm so stupid, really. I thought the Deathbone swordsmen were the same as the stupid zombies in front and didn't have any intelligence. I didn't know they could provide support. When I rested, I started the group and had Kit's fight at the front. He was very obedient and listened to every word I said. I controlled the Terror Knights from behind and taught them energy attacks. I taught them step by step and had Kit's demonstrate. My name is Kit's. There was no response. When I turned around, all I saw was a bunch of bats. Our Kit's was gone, after letting his mind wander for 0.1 seconds, Bai Xiaowen hurriedly put away these improper thoughts. Kit screamed and turned into a group of bats to escape with all his might. The Deathbone swordsman already had basic intelligence. Other than patrolling in a small area, they could also call for support. What was even more hateful was that their alert range was quite large. With a howl, all the Deathbone swordsmen in the tomb would chase after them. Bai Xiaowen gritted his teeth and raised his hand towards the corpse of a Deathbone swordsman. He used Soul Essence to activate Dark Resurrection. Although the Deathbone swordsman was a level 13 elite creature, Bai Xiaowen was equivalent to a level 10 overlord. With the advantage of being 2 levels higher, Bai Xiaowen's elemental energy exceeded the opponent's and successfully revived the dead Deathbone swordsman. Fortunately, Dark Resurrection looked at Bai Xiaowen's original elemental energy limit and not the reduced elemental energy limit after the elemental energy imprint was planted. With the addition of a Deathbone swordsman and the large number of summoned creatures, the situation was finally stabilized. Bai Xiaowen ordered the half-dead close combat creatures to retreat. He then used Soul Essence to activate another skill of Death's Visage, strengthening undead allies. Rays of black light enveloped the summoned creatures and personal guards. Their attributes increased and their spiritual energy also increased. It was as if all of them had increased by 1 level. Bai Xiaowen carefully recalled. Elemental energy circulated in his body and he raised his arms. Control skill, Army Prestige. display the prestige of the friendly army and intimidate the enemy. This move was useless against the Frost Rage zombies and wandering corpses without intelligence, but it was effective against the undead bone swordsmen who had basic intelligence. A huge shadow of a skeleton appeared above the heads of the 10 skeletal archers. It opened its black mouth and laughed silently. Out of the 6 deathbone swordsmen, 3 of them cowered in fear. Their attack speed and accuracy were greatly reduced, and their movement techniques were no longer as elusive as before. There were also 2 deathbone swordsmen who were terrified and curled up in a corner, not moving at all. Only the last deathbone swordsman managed to resist the influence of the army prestige. Bai Xiaowen gave a soft cry of surprise. This control technique was actually unexpectedly useful. It was only at the beginner level, but its effect was almost the same as the mutated skill deterrence. No wonder it was a skill from Tai Gong's Art of War with 7 points of priority. However, it consumed a lot of elemental energy. It consumed a total of 100 points of elemental energy. Furthermore, using such a large amount of elemental energy at once caused both physical and mental stress. Bai Xiaowen felt a sense of emptiness. It was similar to the feeling of weakness after doing a set of extreme weightlifting. Elemental energy skills. Bai Xiaowen squinted his eyes. He felt that he had grasped a key point. The wave of deathbone swordsmen in front of him lost their ability to resist under the influence of the army prestige skill and were killed one after another. The 3 Terror Knights had finally completed their apprenticeship. Not only did they learn how to use their spiritual energy to attack, but they also learned how to use their spiritual energy to protect themselves. This was also the result of being slashed by the deathbone swordsmen again and again. Therefore, actual combat training was the fastest way to improve. If it was purely training with summon creatures, it would definitely not be so efficient. After suffering this loss, Bai Xiaowen became more careful and advanced slowly. Now, it was finally the turn of the chief-tier creatures to teach. He chose the Death Knights first. As more and more creatures learned how to use their spiritual energy to attack, the team's strength also increased steadily. Along the way, they cleared most of the tomb passages and chambers in the 3rd mausoleum. In the last main chamber, there was a tall deathbone swordsman leader. It was already a rare elite and had a spiritual energy value of 1,200 points. Behind it were 6 other deathbone swordsmen. Seeing this deathbone swordsman leader, Bai Xiaowen felt a burst of excitement. "I've confirmed with my eyes that you're mine." Bai Xiaowen's elemental energy value was 1,291 points. At this stage, this deathbone swordsman leader was basically the strongest creature he could use to Dark Resurrection. After meeting it, he immediately used the army prestige skill. As expected, 3 of the deathbone swordsmen squatted in the corner and drew circles. The remaining deathbone swordsmen were also cowering, their attack speed greatly decreasing. Bai Xiaowen controlled the Death Knights and activated the army charge, charging forward with a blood-red halo. Unexpectedly, the deathbone swordsman leader casually slashed horizontally and forced the Death Knights to retreat a few steps. The momentum of the army charge came to an abrupt halt. Even the summon creature's skills are ineffective. This is definitely not a coincidence. Bai Xiaowen recalled the situation when his spells and talismans were ineffective. Combined with the successful army prestige skill, he felt that he had found the reason. It was not that awakened skills could not be used. It was just that elemental energy was needed to activate them in order to threaten evolved monsters. Otherwise, evolved monsters would only need to use their spiritual energy to easily break or resist the effects of awakened skills. However, after discovering this problem, Bai Xiaowen was still unable to solve it for the time being. How could he use elemental energy to replace spiritual energy and use awakened skills? This was much more complicated than using elemental energy to attack. Bai Xiaowen did not have time to think about this problem for now. He used the opportunity created by the army prestige skill to summon creatures and kill the deathbone swordsman one by one. The rare elite-level deathbone swordsman leader did indeed cause a lot of casualties to Bai Xiaowen's team. Its whole body was covered in black gas, and it came and went like the wind. Every strike was extremely tricky and impossible to guard against. Moreover, its intelligence was very high. It actually knew to ignore the melee creatures and attack the Deathbone archers first. The Deathbone archers were really unlucky. Without the ability to protect themselves with spiritual energy, they were basically killed by the Deathbone swordsman leader with a single strike. In fact, even if they had the ability to protect themselves with spiritual energy, with their 500 points of spiritual energy, they probably would not be able to withstand the attacks of the Deathbone swordsman leader. After calculating the priority of the Deathbone swordsman leader's attacks, Bai Xiaowen used useless Deathbone fiend as bait and trapped the Deathbone swordsman leader in a corner. Then, Kits, Delifa, and the Death Knights surrounded it from 3 sides. Slash by slash, they slowly reduced the health of the Deathbone swordsman leader. When Kits and the other 2 could not take it anymore, they would use Butcher and Terror Knight to replace them. In short, they could not let the Deathbone swordsman leader out. After fighting for about 10 minutes, the Deathbone swordsman leader finally fell to the ground with a loud bang. Chapter 1434. Bai Xiaowen immediately gave up on the Deathbone swordsman follower he had just obtained and used the only Dark Resurrection slot on the Deathbone swordsman leader. After using 3 times the amount of soul essence, he finally succeeded in reviving the Deathbone swordsman leader and making him join Bai Xiaowen's team. Although I have a rare elite level 13 follower, it will still be difficult to explore the 4th tomb. Bai Xiaowen thought to himself, I have to figure out how to use elemental energy to cast skills. When he was awakened, Bai Xiaowen had learned a special skill called elemental energy, which occupied a special skill bar. At that time, Bai Xiaowen did not need to consider the path of elemental energy circulation and could use it to cast spells he had learned. But now, elemental energy had become Bai Xiaowen's unique energy source. After it no longer occupied the skill bar, Bai Xiaowen could no longer mindlessly use elemental energy to cast spells. Bai Xiaowen thought that the reason for this was the skill bar. The skill bar of an awakened could be seen as a small guiding program given by the rules of the spirit realm. As long as an awakened tapped a skill book, they could directly learn a skill and then cast it with a thought. They did not need to consider the principle of the skill, the casting method, the path of energy output, etc. After becoming an awakened, there was no restriction on the skill bar and they could learn any number of skills. However, the awakened needed to understand the principle of the skill and be able to know how to do it and why to do it. Why would an awakened skill lose its restriction when it reached the proficient stage? It was the same reason. When an awakened skill reached the proficient stage, the awakened would rely on countless practice and actual combat to cast the skill as an instinct of the body. There was no need for the skill bar to guide it. Bai Xiaowen sat down cross-legged and opened the first level of the second profession classic, the Taishu Sutra. Sharpening one's spear at the last minute would be useful even if it was not fast. After an awakened became an awakened, they would receive the profession classic and directly start the profession trial. Therefore, the purpose of the profession trial was for new awakened to constantly flip through books and extract useful information from the profession classic to solve problems they encountered during the trial. Bai Xiaowen felt that the method of using elemental energy to cast Dao techniques and other skills could definitely be obtained from the Great Void Scripture. Studying the first level of the Great Void Sutra gave Bai Xiaowen the feeling of cultivation. It was as if all the pores in his body had opened up and were continuously devouring spiritual particles from the outside world. He felt a sense of hunger. In the annotation of the first level of the Great Void Scripture, a picture appeared. It was a little person sitting cross-legged in a posture of 5 hearts facing the sky. Each of his palms was holding an object the size of a baby's fist. Bai Xiaowen's heart skipped a beat. He immediately took out 2 spiritual crystals and held them in his palm. At the same time, he posed exactly like the little man and continued to study. At the same time, the 2 spirit crystals in his palm started to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye. The glowing ball of elemental energy in Bai Xiaowen's dantian was also undergoing a transformation. It became more solid and the speed at which it rotated was also increasing bit by bit. After using up all the spirit crystals in his palm, Bai Xiaowen continued. After an unknown period of time, Bai Xiaowen finally opened his eyes. For a moment, the brilliance of the moon and the stars seemed to flash across his eyes. Then, it slowly disappeared. After this training session, Bai Xiaowen felt that he had gained a lot. The glowing ball of elemental energy in his dantian had already condensed into the shape of a fist-sized, blazing white pill. It was almost solid, but the speed at which it rotated had slowed down. Bai Xiaowen could channel his elemental energy more easily and freely. He vaguely felt the carefree feeling of channeling his mental strength. With a slight thought, a gust of elemental energy was transferred to his palm and transformed into the four-colored light of the peace scroll. Then, Bai Xiaowen waved his hand gently and the four-colored light faded away. With Bai Xiaowen's comprehension ability, he quickly understood the techniques of deterrence, the ancient martial arts of the Grassland sect, and how to use elemental energy to cast them. A notification from the spiritual realm's precepts came: you have completed the training of the first level of the Great Void Scripture for the second profession. Current progress, beginner. Your unique energy slot, elemental energy, has undergone a transformation. Currently, it has transformed into a unique energy slot, true elemental energy. Due to the true elemental energy's tempering of your body, your basic strength, agility, and physique have increased by 10 points. You have leveled up to level 11. The upper limit of your elemental energy has increased. Currently, it is at 1,391 points. Bai Xiaowen heaved a sigh of relief and clenched his fist. He felt a steady flow of energy surging in his body. It seemed that his previous thinking was wrong. This profession training required him to successfully master both the first level of the Great Void Scripture and the first part of the Great Void Scripture. Only then would he have a chance of passing. Bai Xiaowen had only realized this after passing through 3 mausoleums and seeing how the difficulty was getting crazier and crazier. Elemental energy had transformed into true elemental energy. Although the upper limit of his elemental energy had only increased by 100 points, Bai Xiaowen's real improvement was far more than that. True elemental energy was a level higher than elemental energy in terms of purity. If elemental energy's priority was 7 points, then true elemental energy's priority was at least 8 points. Using the template theory, Bai Xiaowen, who had mastered the Great Void Scripture, was only equivalent to an Overlord Evolver. At most, he was a rare Overlord. However, Bai Xiaowen, who had mastered the Great Void Scripture, was a genuine King-level Evolver. The purity of the unique energy determined an Evolver's template. It was no wonder Xiao had said, "We Evolvers don't rely on templates." Evolvers looked at the purity of the unique energy. It was possible that some lucky Evolvers had encountered some miraculous encounters that greatly increased the purity of their unique energy. Naturally, their strength would increase greatly. It was not scientific to only determine one's strength based on a template. Bai Xiaowen stood up and led his summoned creatures into the 4th tomb. 2 types of monsters appeared in the 4th tomb. One type was the elite Bloodthorn Banshee, and the other was the rare elite Bloodthorn Banshee. As banshees of the soul race, they had a strong ability to dodge physical attacks. Their ghost-like illusory bodies were almost impossible to deal with. Obviously, the 4th tomb was for new Evolvers to comprehend the technique of energy casting. Fortunately, Bai Xiaowen had already comprehended the technique of elemental energy, casting skills after passing through the 3rd tomb. Needless to say, Kusanagi-style ancient martial arts were served by Shiki Orochi. It had to be said that after the skill column disappeared, the Kusanagi-style sword spirit also lost its carrier and turned into an illusory red shadow. In Bai Xiaowen's dantian, it spiraled along with the rotation of the true elemental energy ball like a small satellite. Bai Xiaowen could no longer rely on the Kusanagi-style sword spirit to cast the ultimate move of the Kusanagi-style ancient martial arts. However, he did not need it now because he had already mastered the Kusanagi-style ancient martial arts. It was just that without the sword spirit, he could not release the ultimate move of the profound level. Chapter 1435. Bai Xiaowen took a deep breath, activating his true inner force, Yuki Orochi. A stream of flames surged out. Compared to the Yuki Orochi, the range of this Yuki Orochi wasn't large, but the color of the flame was blazing white, appearing extremely hot. Kits and the other summoned creatures hurriedly dodged. Because right now, Bai Xiaowen couldn't perfectly control Yuki Orochi's power. If Kits and the others were in the range of Yuki Orochi, they would suffer the same damage. In the awakened stage, with the Kusanagi sword soul and his skill bar, Bai Xiaowen could rely on his consciousness to perfectly control Yuki Orochi's power, so he could mindlessly use it on both sides of the chaotic battle. Under Bai Xiaowen's control, Yuki Orochi's lethality would avoid allies. Kits and the Wrath Claw, and the other summoned creatures, even if they were in the middle of Yuki Orochi's flames, would be no different from ordinary fire, equivalent to taking a bath. But now it was different. Without the skill bar, Bai Xiaowen had to rely on himself to control. In the future, when Bai Xiaowen's control of true inner force reached perfection, he would be able to differentiate the range of his attacks, only harming enemies and not allies. Right now, he was still far from that. Of course, with true inner force as the energy, Yuki Orochi's lethality was quite frightening. After the blazing white flame swept past, the Bloodthorn Banshee's protective spiritual energy instantly dissipated. With a sad cry, its body was charred black, and its feathers turned into ashes. It was actually burned to ashes on the spot, and its health value was completely wiped out. Even the rare elite Bloodthorn Banshee's health value fell by more than half, its wings broken, and it fell to the ground, struggling to crawl away. "Master, you're too strong," Kits shouted. He hurriedly went up to beat up the fallen Bloodthorn Banshee, waving his sharp claws, and killed the heavily injured Bloodthorn Banshee in a few moves. Bloodthorn Banshees were worth 4 points each, while Bloodthorn Banshees were worth 6 points. Bai Xiaowen looked at his hand. Just now, he killed 2 level 13 elites and heavily injured a level 13 rare elite. Vaguely, there was a trace of the demeanor of a lord. Oh no, a king-level master? Bai Xiaowen shook his head. There was still a long way to go. Although he hadn't seen what a king-class expert looked like, it was 3 levels higher than an elite. It should be stronger than what he had just done. There was still a long way to go. Bai Xiaowen recalled that the first level of the Great Void Scripture only gave him the complete cultivation method of true inner force. It did not give him any skills. In this aspect, it was inferior to Tai Gong's Art of War. However, Bai Xiaowen could understand. After all, the Great Void Sutra was a class classic that Bai Xiaowen had found by solving puzzles himself. It was already good enough that he could ensure the completeness of his cultivation. According to the traditional thinking of Huaxia practitioners who emphasized Tao and disregarded techniques, it was possible that the first 2 floors, or even more, did not give any Tao techniques or techniques. As for the art of war, it was a reward given by the rules of the spirit realm. Of course, it was a complete set, and every chapter had a skill. Bai Xiaowen was not in a hurry. He still had the Taiping technique in the middle volume of the Taiping technique. There were many low-level Tao techniques for him to learn. It had to be said here that although Bai Xiaowen had abolished the cultivation traces of the Taiping technique, he had only abolished the special elemental energy skills that he had obtained by relying on the first volume of the Taiping Sutra. As for the second volume of the Taiping technique, it was a collection of Tao techniques. As long as an evolver had Tao elemental energy and knew the inner vision technique, they could learn it. Bai Xiaowen did not have any elemental energy now, but he had true inner force. To a certain extent, it could be considered a superior energy to elemental energy. Naturally, learning it would be easier and more efficient. After that, Bai Xiaowen tested his other skills. True inner force activated deterrence. At this time, after losing the skill bar, it turned into an awakening skill, relying on Bai Xiaowen's basic priority to exert force. When Bai Xiaowen, who had the king template, 8 points, cast it, it was truly awe-inspiring, comparable to Haushikuhaki. The Bloodthorn Banshee was stunned, and the Bloodthorn Banshee screamed and fled. Even Bai Xiaowen's summoned creature army was stunned one by one. Only a few chief-level creatures did not faint, and they were trembling in place. Bai Xiaowen was helpless. Without the skill bar, he had to rely on himself to guide it, causing the power to be difficult to control. It was really troublesome. On the battlefield, a single true inner force deterrence could cause his own personal army to collapse. Wouldn't that be funny? Bai Xiaowen concluded, before he could perfectly control the power of the skill, he must use range skills with caution. Bai Xiaowen could only use his true inner force to activate the Taiping Book. The power of the Taiping Book had increased greatly, but unfortunately, none of the current four-colored talismans could cause damage. I'm missing a damaging Dao technique skill. Bai Xiaowen was helpless. The low-level Dao techniques in the Taiping Book didn't include lightning arts. It seemed that lightning arts was a high-level skill in the Taiping Book, and he couldn't learn it for the time being. Bai Xiaowen rummaged through his storage space. There was a skill book called Thunderstorm Technique, which was suitable for the current situation. Unfortunately, this kind of awakened skill book required a skill bar to learn. It was different from the Dao techniques recorded in the Taiping Book, so Bai Xiaowen couldn't learn it. Wait, there's always a way out. Maybe I can try this. Bai Xiaowen's thoughts turned quickly. He immediately summoned the skeletal demon arcane master, who hadn't had much of a presence until now, and shared his memories. The skeletal demon arcane master had absorbed the soul of the Yellow Turban Army's great doctor, and had a skill called Lightning Strike. More importantly, the skeletal demon arcane master had evolved, so he didn't have a skill bar. The Lightning Strike skill had become a knowledge skill, similar to an awakened skill, in his memories, and Bai Xiaowen could learn it through sharing. Sharing successful. In just a few seconds, Bai Xiaowen had already memorized the Lightning Strike skill, the incantation, and other techniques. He raised his hand towards the empty space in front of him and condensed his true inner force. A bolt of lightning struck down from the sky, leaving a charred mark on the ground. The skeletal demon arcane master's lightning strike isn't very powerful, and it can only be used on a single target. It should be considered a simplified version of lightning arts, similar to the Western magician's lightning strike. Anyway, I can use it. It has the effect of warding off evil, so it should be quite useful in the graveyard dungeon. After learning lightning strike, Bai Xiaowen realized that he could learn many of the skills of his summoned creatures, as long as he understood the principles behind them. Of course, being able to learn them was one thing, but whether he could use them after learning them was another. For example, the Death Knight's blasphemy was cast using negative spiritual energy. Whether it could be replaced by true inner force was something he had to try. On the other hand, Lightning Strike was a simplified version of Huaxia's Dao technique, so it was easy to learn and use. In the fourth tomb, Bai Xiaowen activated his sweeping mode. Chapter 1436. After learning Lightning Strike, he didn't even need to use grass-style ancient martial arts against a small number of monsters. Dark Brush, Ghost Burn, they all dealt fire damage. How could they compare to Lightning Strike's evil-breaking damage? After Bai Xiaowen learned Lightning Strike, he could even control the undead demon arcane master to use Lightning Strike. Bloodthorns and Bloodthorn Banshees would take extra damage from magic attacks. When Bai Xiaowen used True Inner Force Lightning Strike, it would break their protective black aura and hit their health points to rock bottom. The undead demon arcane master would follow up with a spiritual lightning strike to finish them off without any hindrance. The other summoned creatures were just side characters. They could only practice their spiritual attacks. In the final tomb, the Banshee leader, the Mother of Bloodthorns, didn't pose much of a threat to the team. Bai Xiaowen saw the opportunity and threw out a True Inner Force charm. The Mother of Bloodthorns didn't struggle much before it was charmed and became another one of Bai Xiaowen's fighters. Bai Xiaowen shared the Mother of Bloodthorns' memory fragments and tried to learn its skills. The Mother of Bloodthorns had a corrosive mist ability. It could turn its body into mist and corrode all life forms within the mist. At the same time, the Mother of Bloodthorns that had lost its physical body could dodge most physical attacks and skills. It could be said to be a good offensive and defensive skill. This was similar to the Banshee Queen's skill, Corrosive Mist. Bai Xiaowen first shared the Corrosive Mist casting technique. However, when he tried to cast it himself, there was a problem. He couldn't cast it no matter how hard he tried and almost caused his true inner force to become chaotic. It seems that skills can't be learned randomly. Although Corrosive Mist is a good skill, it's probably only suitable for soul race creatures, or spiritual powers with negative effects. Bai Xiaowen used the memory sharing method to learn the summon creature's skill to verify his guess. The facts proved that it could be learned, but it couldn't be cast. However, it was still useful. At least, Bai Xiaowen could control the Banshee Queen to cast Corrosive Mist. After clearing the 4th tomb, Bai Xiaowen's points had already risen to 246. In the 5th tomb, a commander-tier creature finally appeared, Dark-Kin Blood Demon. The Dark-Kin Blood Demon was actually an advanced vampire Grand Lord. Beside each Dark-Kin Blood Demon, there were also elite Dark-Kin Blood Slaves and rare elite Dark-Kin Blood Guards protecting them, forming small groups. It seemed that the setting of the 5th mausoleum was only a great increase in difficulty. It was unlike the previous 4 mausoleums, which taught the awakened ones the importance of energy attacks, energy protection, specialization, and energy skills. Bai Xiaowen discovered a problem. As a level 13 leader of the blood breeds, the Dark-Kin Blood Demons should have high intelligence. However, the Dark-Kin Blood Demons here seemed to have average intelligence. They were just more experienced in battle. This should also be a unique characteristic of the trial grounds. The monsters in the mausoleum were all direct confrontations and didn't waste time talking when they could. For a plot master, the great hoodwinker, like Bai Xiaowen, it was actually not very friendly. But since it was a trial, it was purely a place to hone one's combat skills. And there were also advantages to having low intelligence. That was, their combat routines were more mechanical and stiff. With Bai Xiaowen's super brain, after defeating 2 Dark-Kin Blood Demon squads, he could easily know what skill to use when encountering a follow-up Dark-Kin Blood Demon. Naturally, he could easily deal with it. After the 5th tomb was cleared, Bai Xiaowen's trial points soared to 562 points. The one with the greatest progress was Bai Xiaowen's Summon Creature Legion. After the 5 mausoleums training, they were already qualified level 11 evolver creatures. They had mastered attaching spiritual power to attack, spiritual power protection, and so on. As for the top students, Keats and Delifa, they had mastered energy skills one step ahead of the rest. It was just that their energy skills weren't of much use for the time being. Bai Xiaowen stepped into the 6th tomb. This tomb was a little different from the previous 5. Whether it was the architectural layout or the carving style, it was very different. The interior of the tomb was very spacious. The dome was 10 meters high, and the tomb passage was more than 30 meters wide. Such a spacious building was big enough for an elephant to wrestle, let alone a humanoid creature fighting. Furthermore, there were green flames rising from each of the carvings. While illuminating the interior of the tomb, it also made the atmosphere of the tomb lush green and gloomy. Bai Xiaowen saw a tall monster at first glance. This monster was 3 meters tall and had 2 curved horns on its head. It looked like a bull that walked upright. Alright, it was a little uglier than a bull. Its 2 feet were hoof-shaped, but its hands weren't. It was also holding a wide green flaming sword. Bai Xiaowen used insight. Demon Guard, level 14, race, Demon/Demon Tribe, attributes, STR 120, DX 71, STR 100, INT 60, health, 100%, spiritual power, 2 out of 100. Beside the Demon Guard, there was a group of jumping flame imps. They were also demons, but they were only level 13 normal monsters with a spiritual power value of 700 points. This is a cemetery background, right? Shouldn't they all be spirit types? Why would there be a demon type? Bai Xiaowen frowned. He realized that things weren't that simple. Let's fight. No matter what, I'll get more points. The mother of Bloodthorns flapped its wings and let out a sharp howl. Rings of sound wave attacks appeared and enveloped the flame imps. The Mother of Bloodthorn's sound wave attacks worked on the spiritual level and had a spiritual impact. The flame imp's proud skill, Flame Arrow, couldn't be used. The demon guard took large steps forward and slashed its green flaming sword at the Mother of Bloodthorns. The Peace Book, Imprisonment Talisman. Now, Bai Xiaowen could use the other talismans of the Peace Book while controlling an enemy with the Bewitching Talisman. This slight change was a leap. It could be said that one skill of the Peace Book had been split into 4 skills. The demon guard's footsteps stopped abruptly. It howled at the sky and the green flames on its body rose layer by layer, trying to break through the imprisonment of the Imprisonment Talisman. However, the Imprisonment Talisman released by true inner force was too powerful. With the energy of the demon guard's green flames, it wouldn't be able to break through in a short time. Bai Xiaowen manipulated the summoned creatures to first destroy the surrounding flame imps, then besiege the demon guards. After 7 seconds, the power of the Imprisonment Talisman dissipated. The demon guard's body suddenly turned red and entered a state of rage. It held the green flaming sword with both hands and slashed diagonally at the summoned creatures in front of it. This slash felt like a skill. The blade seemed to have an invisible black hole, producing a strong suction force. The summoned creatures couldn't dodge and could only take it head-on. Chapter 1437. Bai Xiaowen controlled the Death Knight and waved his lance, channeling his spiritual energy to block the attack. The lance of the Death Knight was not a psionic equipment. It was similar to Delifa's spiritual spear, a weapon condensed from negative energy. The skeleton warrior's greatsword and the skeleton archer's bow could be seen as a summoned creature's own weapon. They did not have any additional attack power. Of course, Bai Xiaowen now had the highest authority of the Black Soul Stone and had given the Death Knight his consciousness. He could now wear equipment with limited slots. Clang! The lance collided with the green fire war blade and a loud sound was heard. The thick black gas on the surface of the Death Knight's lance dispersed. Its body trembled violently and its health dropped by 14%. At the same time, its body stiffened. The Infernal Guardian did not seem to be affected at all. After a short moment of recovery, it raised its green fire war blade again. The familiar suction force appeared again and the Death Knight did not even have a chance to dodge. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. The Infernal Guardian's attack could be used infinitely. There were 2 explanations. Either it was a passive skill effect, or the Infernal Guardian's battle expertise had reached a high level. Its opponent could not dodge at all. If it was a one-on-one battle, the Death Knight would definitely be killed by the Infernal Guardian's second attack. Although it still had 86% health, it could not channel spiritual energy to protect its body when it stiffened. It would be killed instantly. On the surface, the Death Knight and the Infernal Guardian were both leader-level evolved creatures. There was only a difference of 3 levels. But in reality, the Death Knight did not have any evolved equipment. It was equivalent to fighting the Infernal Guardian head-on. No matter if it was attributes or spiritual energy, the Death Knight would be crushed. Fortunately, this was not a one-on-one battle between the Death Knight and the Infernal Guardian. Delifa attacked and the spiritual spear accurately hit the side of the green fire war blade, causing it to deviate slightly. At the same time, the butcher threw the iron chain and pulled the Death Knight back from the warhorse. With a loud bang, the Infernal Guardian's war blade killed the undead warhorse. The Death Knight rolled a few times on the ground and got up silently. Gray mist condensed beneath his feet, and soon, an undead warhorse appeared beneath him. The undead warhorse was the same as the lance. They were both formed from the negative energy of the Death Knight. Originally, it would take a lot of mental energy to recondense, but now it was the Death Knight's spiritual energy that was being consumed. Bai Xiaowen opened his palm. True inner force, Berserk Curse Talisman flew straight to the Wrath Claw. The Wrath Claw's body expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye. In terms of size, it was not far off from the evil demon guards. More importantly, the Wrath Claw's spiritual energy value increased by 300 points. the aura of the wolf was completely different from before. The Berserk Curse charm, which was cast with true inner force, had some additional functions that even Bai Xiaowen did not know about. Now was the time to observe it. The reason why Bai Xiaowen didn't know about it was because there was no skill bar now. Bai Xiaowen couldn't see the data description of the Berserk Curse and could only use his heart to experience it. The Wrath Claw's claw attack collided with the Infernal Guard's green fire blade. With a boom, the protective energy of the Wrath Claw and the Infernal Guard was scattered. The health of the two decreased by a bit. Although the Wrath Claw's health decreased by a bit, it could still take the Infernal Guard's attack head-on. Because of the Berserk Curse talisman's effect, it did not fall into a state of paralysis and could quickly launch a second attack. Bai Xiaowen immediately realized that true inner force, Berserk Curse talisman could greatly reduce the paralysis effect. Moreover, when the two clashed, the protective energy would be scattered. This was the best opportunity. Bai Xiaowen waved his hand and released true inner force, lightning strike, landing on the head of the Infernal Guard that had temporarily lost its protective green fire energy. A bolt of lightning flashed, and the Infernal Guard's health dropped by 11%. Evil Destroyer's damage was also a bonus for demons. However, the Infernal Guard's skin was thick, and it was different from the Bloodthorn Banshee that was easy to push down. If it was the Bloodthorn Banshee, without the protection of spiritual energy, a true inner force lightning strike would be enough to reduce its health by half, and even cause it to become disabled. However, no matter how durable the Infernal Guard was, it was useless. With the Wrath Claw blocking the front, the Infernal Guard was only a competent sandbag in front of Bai Xiaowen's large army. Every time it clashed with the Wrath Claw, the Infernal Guard's protective green fire energy would dissipate for a moment. Then, Bai Xiaowen and the Undead Fiend Arcane Master's lightning strike would land, and at the same time, the undead archers would fire in unison, and the other summon creatures would attack. The evil demon guards that didn't have the green fire energy to protect their bodies for the time being could be said to have cut into their flesh. The Infernal Guard's health quickly dropped. Suddenly, the Infernal Guard let out a muffled roar like a cow, and clenched its fist at Bai Xiaowen. A huge green fire claw seemed to appear out of thin air, and grabbed Bai Xiaowen. A powerful squeezing force surged out, and the green fire energy continuously corroded Bai Xiaowen's body. At the same time, the ground under the Infernal Guard's feet seemed to be injected with energy, and green fire energy spread out. On this green fire ground, his mobility was greatly increased. In 2 steps, he was in front of Bai Xiaowen, and the green fire blade slashed down. When Bai Xiaowen was grabbed by the green fire claw, he immediately used true inner force to protect his body. On the surface of Bai Xiaowen's body, a blazing white light appeared, and the green fire claw that wrapped around him was shattered inch by inch. This was the embodiment of extremely pure true inner force. The quality of the true inner force completely suppressed the green fire energy, and was able to shatter it. If described in terms of data, this actually included a clash of priorities. True inner force, substitution Dao technique. The green fire blade slashed down, and Bai Xiaowen's body became illusory. Then, a straw doll that was burned by the green fire and split into 2 fell to the ground. Bai Xiaowen's real body had already moved a distance of 7 to 8 feet. The Wrath Claw loyally protected its master. Even though the Berserk Talisman's duration had expired, it still charged forward without any regard for its own safety, and blocked the Infernal Guard once again. Bai Xiaowen took a deep breath, and the 3 Terror Knights suddenly transformed, and merged into one. In the black fog, a 4-meter-tall Terror Knight appeared. The Death Knight charged forward with it. This time, the Legion Charge skill was also cast with spiritual power. Its body was no longer wrapped in blood-red air, but in black fog. The giant Terror Knight crashed into the Infernal Guard, and replaced the Wrath Claw. Then, it was a new round of attacks from the summoned creatures. This cycle quickly reduced the Infernal Guard's health to below 30%. Large chunks of its flesh peeled off, and emitted a corrosive green fog when they fell to the ground. Then, they were burned to ashes by the green fire energy contained within. The Infernal Guard's combat power dropped by 50%. Then, it no longer had any strength to resist, and was overturned on the ground. Chapter 1438. Bai Xiaowen heaved a sigh of relief. This evil demon guard, if measured by its template, should be a rare leader. The death of the evil demon guard also gave Bai Xiaowen 10 trial points. The surrounding flaming imps were more shabby, only giving him 1 point. Fortunately, there were more of them. After a short rest, Bai Xiaowen continued to clean up the tombs. After a tough battle, the 6th tomb was declared cleared. The high-intensity battle allowed Bai Xiaowen's summoned creature army to improve very quickly. Not only did all of them master spiritual power attacks and body protection techniques, but the Wrath Claw and Death Knight also mastered the technique of using spiritual power to cast skills. Only now did Bai Xiaowen's combat potential as an evolved being be fully developed. I wonder what will appear in the 7th tomb. Could there be Lord-level evolved being monsters? Bai Xiaowen carefully stepped into the 7th tomb. Unexpectedly, the 7th mausoleum was empty. There was not even a shadow of a monster in sight. Bai Xiaowen thought that he had encountered an invisible monster and hurriedly ordered his summoned creatures to form a circular formation to protect him in the center. Then, he moved carefully. But no matter what, he did not find any trace of a monster. After a while, Bai Xiaowen finally confirmed that the 7th tomb was empty. Could it be that my summoned creatures have already learned how to use spiritual power to fight, and the rules of the spiritual realm no longer think that I need the trial? So they withdrew the monsters? Bai Xiaowen frowned and shook his head. That can't be right. The layout and monsters of this trial should have been fixed the moment the door opened. With doubts, Bai Xiaowen walked to the last main tomb chamber. Pushing open the stone door of the main tomb chamber, there were no monsters inside. There was only a speck of light floating in the air like a wisp of will-o'-the-wisp, swaying gently. What is this? Bai Xiaowen walked over. Suddenly, the speck of light flew over and shot straight at Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen was shocked. The summoned creature did not wait for Bai Xiaowen's order and rushed forward to stop him. However, the speck of light seemed to have no substance. It passed through all the summoned creatures and flew straight into Bai Xiaowen's left eye. Boom! Bai Xiaowen blacked out. In the middle of a chaotic ocean, 2 huge books were floating in the air. One of the books had the words Tai Gong's Art of War written on its cover, while the other one had the words Taishu Sutra written on it. Bai Xiaowen's figure slowly appeared. Isn't this my sea of consciousness? Bai Xiaowen was slightly stunned. What was that speck of light? Just as he was thinking about this, the dot of light suddenly appeared again and landed about 5 meters in front of Bai Xiaowen. The light spots spread out, and the image of a middle-aged man appeared. The image of the middle-aged man smiled warmly and said, "You've finally reached this step. I have been waiting for you for a long time." Bai Xiaowen lost the ability to speak for a moment. He was very familiar with the image of the middle-aged man in front of him. This was the person hidden in the depths of his memory, his father in this life, Bai Yuan Tang. Bai Xiaowen opened his mouth and wanted to call him father, but he could not. The current Bai Xiaowen was the fusion of the Bai Xiaowen of 2 spacetimes. The moment he saw Bai Yuan Tang, an inexplicable emotion welled up in his heart. But I am a transmigrator after all. Bai Xiaowen thought to himself, can he accept the fusion of his son's soul with another person's? Bai Yuan Tang smiled and said, I know you have a lot of questions to ask me. Let's settle the first one, your relationship with me. After a pause, Bai Yuan Tang said meaningfully, is the Eye of Evolution useful? A trace of shock appeared on Bai Xiaowen's face, and then it became relieved. As expected, this is not a coincidence. You're the one behind all this. Bai Yuan Tang smiled and said, impudent. Call me daddy. Bai Xiaowen did not call him that. Instead, he asked, why did you choose me? Bai Yuan Tang shook his head. What do you mean by chosen you? You are my son in both spacetimes. Who else would I choose if not you? After a pause, Bai Yuan Tang said, when you were very young, you showed great talent. I remember that winter, I had to leave Earth and tried to transplant the Eye of Evolution to you. Unfortunately, I failed and was too hasty. Your soul was split by the Eye of Evolution's great power, and a part of it deviated from the normal flow of time and came to another timeline, attaching itself to an orphan. This is the origin of web novelist by Xiaowen. I have to say that your talent is outstanding. If a normal person's soul was split into two, there would only be two idiots. However, both of your split souls have relatively high intelligence and mobility. You really are my sons. You should know what happened after that. I could only make the best of it and design the Eye of Evolution to travel through time and bring the other half of you back to this era, completing the fusion. Bai Xiaowen suppressed the stormy waves in his chest. It turned out that the two spacetimes of Bai Xiaowen were originally one. It was not Zhuangzhou dreaming of a butterfly, nor was it a butterfly dreaming of Zhuangzhou, but one body with two souls, returning to one. As for the super brain, it was the result of his original talent, the fusion of the two souls, returning to normal. Of course, it was hard to say whether there were some optimizations of the Eye of Evolution. After digesting the shocking news, Bai Xiaowen let out a long breath. No wonder. In the depths of the memories of both me, there was the same scene. It was a snowy winter, and you and your mother kept walking forward and disappeared into the snow. This scene was probably the last clear memory of his soul before it split apart. Bai Yuantang nodded slightly. Sorry. From the results, my plan was successful. You completed the transition of life and became an evolver. Bai Xiaowen ridiculed, Dad. In the psionic era, I was almost beaten to death by my classmates. Oh no, I think I was already beaten to death. You still say your plan was successful? Bai Yuantang laughed. Who said you would be beaten to death? You just went into shock, far from death. This is a necessary inducement. Otherwise, how could your two souls fuse? Bai Xiaowen said helplessly, well, this can be considered part of your plan. But you are so powerful. I am also a strong second generation, right? It doesn't make sense for me to be so miserable. I am already in my third year of high school, and even the attributes of a quasi-awakened are still far away. Looking at how Xiaojun was treated, one would know what a strong second generation was like. Bai Yuantang said, actually, I told your sister to disguise herself as a weak awakened and only let you and Xiaojun live a normal life. I did not provide you with any additional resources. The reason is simple. If the two souls want to fuse, they must be balanced. If you grow too fast in the year of 1996, causing the 2021 ADU to be unable to keep up, the difficulty of the fusion will greatly increase. If you become an awakened, you can forget about the fusion. Chapter 1439. Bai Xiaowen recalled his childhood memories. His sister, Bai Xiaohua, was indeed a low-level awakened with low strength. He didn't expect her to be a hidden big shot. What happened after that? Where did she go after she disappeared? Bai Xiaowen asked. Bai Yuantang sighed. She met with an accident. Bai Xiaowen's expression suddenly changed. Bai Yuantang said slowly, Xiaohua has been taking care of you and Xiaojun. After you had the basic ability to take care of yourself, she came to Starlink to help me. During an exploration of a universe secret realm, she was ambushed by the enemy and was hit with an irreversible curse, causing her soul to gradually disintegrate. An irreversible curse? Even Dad can't remove it? Bai Xiaowen asked. Judging from Bai Yuantang's appearance, he should be an extremely powerful expert. Bai Yuantang sighed. Compared to the chess pieces on the chessboard, I do have some strength. However, my strength is nothing in front of the chess players. Who are the chess players? Bai Xiaowen asked. He naturally understood Bai Yuantang's metaphor. Bai Yuantang didn't answer directly. Instead, he said slowly, this chess game has been set up for countless years. Every chess player is a big shot that you can't imagine. As for me, I'm just a lucky latecomer. In essence, I'm just a mortal. In fact, in order to obtain the qualifications to play chess, I've already given up my physical form. Why do I need Xiaohua to help me? It's because I don't have a physical body. Although I have the qualifications to play chess, I don't have the ability to place a chess piece. I need Xiaohua to help me place a chess piece. Although her strength is very weak, as long as I'm given a lever, I can move the entire chess game. This is also the reason why the enemy has their eyes on Xiaohua. Bai Yuantang showed a look of regret. Xiaohua's identity was exposed, and I had to pay a heavy tuition fee. I didn't expect their surveillance to extend into the spirit realm. So I didn't dare to rashly contact you. If you contact me now, will you be able to avoid the enemy's surveillance? Bai Xiaowen asked. Bai Yuantang nodded. The training ground for evolvers is actually a kind of mirror space. It doesn't belong to the normal spirit realm. When you killed the trial monsters, did you discover that they lacked intelligence and didn't drop materials after they died? This was it. Even so, I was very careful. I sent a soul seed into your sea of consciousness to communicate with you, just in case. After a pause, Bai Yuantang said, Xiaowen, you're my last hope. Bai Xiaowen frowned slightly and said, Dad, what do you mean by the chess game? What would be the worst possible outcome of the chess game? Bai Yuantang pointed at his own illusory image. The worst-case scenario is actually like this. And you will follow in Xiaohua's footsteps. Bai Xiaowen asked, then what are the conditions for us to win? If he didn't know the winning conditions, he wouldn't know if he was working in the right direction. Bai Yuantang said, I'm looking for it too. However, one thing is certain, as long as we find the person behind the scenes in the spirit realm, we won't be far from breaking the situation. How do we find out who's in charge of the spirit realm? Bai Xiaowen asked again. Bai Yuantang replied, you've only just stepped into the ranks of evolvers. Although your starting point is not bad, you're still far from being able to help me make my move. My first request for you is to improve yourself and reach your sister's peak strength. The figure of his sister, Bai Xiaohua, appeared in Bai Xiaowen's mind. Her figure was slender and straight, like a white birch tree. She had long hair that cascaded over her shoulders like a waterfall. Her smile was very warm, as if it could heal all pain and dispel all haze. Sisters, soul has already dissipated? Bai Yuantang said, that curse was very vicious. She tried everything but couldn't break it. She could only use a method I left for her to escape into an awakened plane and hide. Later, she met a Huaxia girl named Qiao Rui. Sister Qiao? Bai Xiaowen shivered. Qiao Rui had acted very strangely when she first met Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen didn't seem to care, but he had already memorized Qiao Rui's strange behavior. Especially when Qiao Rui seemed to have an inexplicable concern for him and Xiao Jun. This made Bai Xiaowen somewhat suspicious. Sometimes, Bai Xiaowen even suspected that Qiao Rui had been possessed by his sister, but he had no evidence. Bai Yuantang said, Qiao Rui didn't know that Xiaohua had secretly attached herself to her. She didn't choose to possess her because the curse came from the soul. Even if she did, she wouldn't be able to change the outcome of death. Instead, she would harm an innocent girl. Xiaohua only wanted to use this girl to get a chance to return to Earth. After a pause, Bai Yuantang continued, after Xiaohua left, I don't know much about what happened on Earth. According to the time, her soul should have dissipated 3 years ago. Bai Xiaowen slowly sat in the clouds. He rested his chin on his knees and hugged his legs with his arms. He tried to curl his body up. Regret, sadness, disappointment, all kinds of feelings attacked him. Xiaowen, you're the older brother. You have to protect your younger sister. I'm the older sister. Of course, I have to protect you and your younger sister. Xiaowen, Xiaojun, and I will never be separated. The answer to this riddle must be Niu, right? A girl standing next to you is obviously Niu. Don't be discouraged, Xiaowen. One day, you'll become very, very smart. Even your older sister can't compare to you. That's what Daddy said. Don't worry. I'll definitely find Daddy and Mommy. No one will say that we're parentless anymore. Nice to meet you. I'm Xiao Rui. Junior Xiaowen, I felt very close to you the moment I saw you. I'm 2 years older than you. Can I be your older sister? I'm so silly. The first time I met Xiao Rui was 2 years ago. At that time, Sister Xiaohua should have temporarily replaced Xiao Rui's consciousness. That was the last time we met. Xiao Rui shed 2 drops of tears the first time we met. Those 2 drops of tears weren't from Xiao Rui. They were from Sister Xiaohua. She couldn't hold on any longer. Her soul was about to dissipate. She just wanted to hear me call her older sister. Bai Yuantang calculated that Bai Xiaohua's soul dissipated 3 years ago. If this calculation wasn't wrong, Bai Xiaohua persisted for an extra year. Only when she saw Bai Xiaowen with her own eyes did Bai Xiaohua finally let go of her obsession and dissipate. From then on, Xiao Rui didn't do anything strange, other than showing an inexplicable concern for him and Xiao Jun. Chapter 1440. Is there any hope for my sister to be resurrected? After a long time, Bai Xiaowen took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Bai Yuantang shook his head and said, the dissipation of the soul is irreversible. Is there really no hope at all? Bai Yuantang thought for a while and said, at least with my knowledge, I can't find a way to resurrect her. However, there are too many mysteries in the psionic era. I dare not say that I understand all of them, especially things related to the soul. That's a forbidden area for God. Dad, you said that God can resurrect my sister? Bai Yuantang shook his head. I'm not God, so I don't know. The reshaping of the soul is a field only God knows. Is it possible for mortals to become gods? Bai Xiaowen asked another question. Bai Yuantang said, generally speaking, it's impossible. However, nothing is absolute. For example, I'm already on the path to becoming a god. I'll do my best to help Dad become a god. Bai Xiaowen seemed to have found his goal. Then resurrect my sister. Our family will be reunited. Bai Yuantang was silent for a while and said, don't be too impulsive. Now, hide your identity and increase your strength. There's one thing you have to pay special attention to. Bai Xiaowen looked at Bai Yuantang. Bai Yuantang said, if you're favored by God and want to become his chosen one, you must refuse. Why? Bai Yuantang said, becoming a chosen one will allow you to gain God's favor and effortlessly gain great power. However, it also means that you'll become a servant and will never be able to break free from God's brand. Remember, power comes with a price. The easier the power, the greater the price. Bai Xiaowen nodded sternly. There was a price to pay for great power, and this was reflected in the Black Soul Stone. Bai Yuantang said, in addition, becoming a chosen one means that you have no reservations about the God you believe in. He knows all your secrets, including the eye of evolution and your relationship with me. This is an absolute secret that must not be exposed. You must not mention it to your friends, family, or even Xiao Jun. Bai Xiaowen nodded again and asked, Dad, I remember that Mom left with you. Where is she now? Bai Yuantang was silent for a while and shook his head. It's not convenient to tell you the truth now. Just pretend that she never appeared. Pausing for a moment, Bai Yuantang said, there's not much time left. Let's end our conversation here. Bai Xiaowen looked puzzled. Bai Xiaowen had always been unfamiliar with his mother's identity, and it was far less memorable than his sister's, Bai Xiaohua. Bai Xiaowen knew almost nothing about his mother. Now that his father had said that, how could Bai Xiaowen not be suspicious? However, Bai Xiaowen was already very mature. He did not get to the bottom of the matter. Instead, he asked the question he was most concerned about. Dad, is the spiritual realm real or illusory? Bai Yuantang laughed. Then let me ask you, are you real or just an illusion? Bai Xiaowen instinctively wanted to answer, but he couldn't. Bai Yuantang said, let's take a video game as an example. The characters in the game are all written by the developer. To you, the characters in the game are all illusory, right? Bai Xiaowen nodded. Bai Yuantang continued, then one day, the developer will have unparalleled magical powers. He will be able to let the characters in the game walk out of the game and into your so-called reality. He will be able to let you see, touch, and feel. He will even be able to drink with you, fight alongside you, and experience life and death together. Then, is this game character still illusory? Bai Xiaowen was a little confused. He said, how can there be such a powerful developer? Bai Yuantang smiled but did not say anything. Bai Xiaowen quickly realized his mistake and said, I understand. Wasn't the spiritual realm such a developer? No wonder Dad said that finding the mastermind behind the spiritual realm would not be far from solving the problem. You just have to remember that anything you can see, touch, or feel is real, Bai Yuantang said. When you have the magical powers of the developer, what you think is real can actually be seen as illusory, because you can create the same real existence with a wave of your hand, including reconstructing Xiao's soul. It's a bit like the concept of the mind, Bai Xiaowen said. That's right. Bai Yuantang ended the topic and said, your Eye of Evolution has the qualifications to evolve again. I will help you facilitate this evolution. In this sealed trial ground, it's a rare opportunity to evolve, and you can avoid being disturbed by the outside world. Bai Xiaowen suddenly realized that this was the reason why Bai Yuantang had appeared in the seventh tomb of the trial ground. The Eye of Evolution had evolved once before, allowing Bai Xiaowen to share his memories, and the effect of his insight had also increased. However, it was indeed very dangerous that time. Demonic creatures had tried to cross worlds and attack Earth's cities. There was even a high-level demon above level 20 that had tried to extend an arm. Fortunately, there was a small team of evolvers on vacation on Earth who had cut off the arm of the flame demon. Of course, Bai Xiaowen now understood that even without the small team of evolvers, the high-level demon would not have had any advantage. Because it had forcefully crossed worlds, it would cause the psionic particles that maintain the spatial rift to rapidly weaken, and the spatial rift would quickly disappear. Bai Yuantang's figure became more and more illusory, and rays of gentle light converged into Bai Xiaowen's left eye. Bai Xiaowen endured the pain in his eye and asked, Dad, what exactly is the Eye of Evolution? However, he did not receive a reply. Bai Yuantang's figure once again turned into specks of light and disappeared without a trace. I still have many questions, Bai Xiaowen sighed. The main reason was that the news of his sister was too shocking, causing him to lose his mind and miss the great opportunity to understand the mysteries of the psionic era. His father, Bai Yuantang, was actually a big shot who was qualified to play chess. He definitely knew many secrets of the psionic era, such as the origin of the spirit world. For example, the secrets of the Eye of Evolution and so on. He could only wait until the next time they met to ask him. Regrettably, his father, the big shot behind the scenes, was a little down and out. He did not even have a physical body. Otherwise, Bai Xiaowen could have enjoyed the treatment of a powerful second-generation heir. He could activate the Long-Out Yin mode, and the Star Alliance and Quill territory would all kneel down and be conquered. Although the chances are slim, there's still a possibility of my sister being resurrected. Right now, I still need to increase my strength so that I can participate in Father's chess game as soon as possible. Bai Xiaowen quickly withdrew from his Sea of Consciousness. He had learned the term Sea of Consciousness from his father, Bai Xiaowen. It was actually the Sea of Consciousness that Bai Xiaowen had mentioned before. Soon, a series of notifications came from the laws of the spirit world. Chapter 1441. Bai Xiaowen looked at the first notification. Due to unknown reasons, you have lost the talent, insight. Bai Xiaowen paused and looked at his personal panel. Bai Xiaowen, level 11, race, humanoid/human, attributes, strength 46, agility 43, constitution 58, spirit 91, health, 100%, spiritual power, 1391, well, I really don't have the insight talent anymore. And on my personal panel, it shows that the special energy is called spiritual power. It seems that spiritual power is just a generic term for special energy. I was wondering why undead creatures would use spiritual power as a name for their energy. Playing in the A-League and the Super Cup still had a lot of benefits. He had just stepped into the world of evolvers, and without the bonus of equipment, the attributes of the competition rewards were especially precious. Bai Xiaowen won the A-League championship and was rewarded with 8 points of constitution and 8 points of main attribute. In terms of the amount of attribute points, it was even better than the 10 points of attribute points from the Super Cup. But the free attribute points from the Super Cup championship were still redeemable. Now, he hadn't added the 10 free attribute points yet. Bai Xiaowen kept them for now. He still hadn't figured out what the requirements of Evolver's equipment were. Anyway, the 10 points of attribute points wouldn't significantly increase his combat power. He might as well put them aside for now so that he wouldn't regret it when he needed them. Although the insight talent was no longer on his personal panel, Bai Xiaowen could feel that his left eye had an obvious change. When Bai Xiaowen stared at Keats, he could even see the circulation of spiritual power in Keats' body. And the longer he stared, the clearer he could see it. As for what specific effects it had, he could only test it in the future. And most importantly, the red light that occasionally appeared in the Eye of Evolution had disappeared. No matter how Bai Xiaowen stared at it, it was no different from his right eye. Bai Xiaowen looked at the following notifications: the trial has ended. You have received 1464 trial points. You can use the trial points to exchange for creatures in the trial ground and send them back to your territory. Whoosh! A virtual map appeared in front of Bai Xiaowen. 3D images of various creatures appeared on it, with prices next to them. Level 13 Wandering Skeleton, 13 points each. Level 13 Frost Rage Zombie, 15 points each. Level 13 Deathbone Swordsman, 20 points each. The most expensive one was a level 14 Darkkin Blood Demon, which was worth 200 points. Bai Xiaowen skipped over the evolved creatures without even looking at them. His gaze locked onto the awakened undead. Level 3 Skeleton Soldiers, pack price, 3 points per team, 10 per team. Level 5 Skeleton Warriors, pack price, 7 points per team, 10 per team. Other than that, there were also skeleton mages and other normal creatures. They were all monsters that wandered around the cemetery. Since level 3 skeleton soldiers had appeared in this trial ground, they would naturally be on the list of items to be exchanged. Bai Xiaowen waved his hand and said, 100 squads, no, 300 squads of skeleton soldiers first. The 900 points disappeared in an instant. In front of Bai Xiaowen, beams of light scattered, and a total of 3 square formations of skeleton soldiers appeared. Each square formation had 1,000 people. Bai Xiaowen had already learned about the territory's authority. If the other party did not resist, he could effortlessly teleport them to his territory. Without needing to inquire about the rules of the spiritual world, Bai Xiaowen directly raised his hand. An illusory territorial token appeared in his palm. A beam of light spread out and engulfed the 3,000 skeleton soldiers. When the light dissipated, the square formation of the 3,000 skeleton soldiers had disappeared. Then, Bai Xiaowen used 350 points to exchange for 50 squads of skeleton warriors, a total of 500. In the end, he had 214 points left. Bai Xiaowen observed for a while and exchanged for 3 squads of skeleton mages. The rest were exchanged for skeleton soldiers. The light of the territorial token spread out again and took away all the undead creatures. Bai Xiaowen did not choose any of the evolved undead creatures. He even gave up on the awakened creatures with high combat power, such as the Terror Knights. What he wanted were laborers who could develop the territory, not thugs. If he exchanged for thugs, the 1,000 points could at most be exchanged for 100 or so wandering skeletons. To put it bluntly, if the rules of the spiritual world were not friendly to newly evolved suzerain-level evolvers, leading to an army led by a veteran suzerain to come knocking on their door, there would not be much of a difference whether or not there were 100 wandering skeletons. Bai Xiaowen was inclined to believe that as long as he did not seek death and reveal the territory's coordinates, there should not be any veteran suzerains coming to plunder in the short term. In that case, if he did not consider external enemies and develop the territory, the effect of these 4,000 undead laborers would definitely be much greater than 100 wandering skeletons. Bai Xiaowen patted Kit's shoulder. You go back with them. Lead this group of undead and level out a piece of land in the territory. First, build a few houses and solve the problem of housing. After saying this, he placed a magical beacon above Kit's head. A bright Taiji diagram appeared above Kit's head. He raised his head in confusion. Boss, what is this? Bai Xiaowen said, Jinmi is in the territory. I'll place this magical beacon above your head so that she can meet up with you. Bai Xiaowen estimated the time. Jinmi should have already stayed in the territory for more than 2 days. Jinmi was already half an evolver. Even if she did not eat or drink for more than 10 days, it would not affect her ability to move. Moreover, according to Owl's suggestion, Bai Xiaowen had everyone bring enough supplies. The supplies here were not only medicine, ale, and so on. There was also a large amount of light spiritual water, pickled mutant meat, and so on, so that they would not have a problem eating when they first entered the territory. It should be added here that all items containing psionic particles could be put into the storage space and brought into the spiritual world. Light spiritual water and pickled mutant meat were also items containing psionic particles. Facts had proven that Bai Xiaowen had foresight. Kits rubbed the back of his head. I understand, boss. When I see Madam, I will first report that I am safe and sound, and then listen to Madam's arrangements. Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and go. Bai Xiaowen was somewhat depressed because of the series of unforeseen events that had happened today. He did not joke around with Kits and waved his hand to send him into the territory. I came out of the trial grounds. I should have already become a true evolver. I don't know if Jinmi has followed my level and also advanced to an evolver's template. Just as Bai Xiaowen was thinking, he received a notification from the spiritual world's rules. The trial has ended. You will be transferred to the corresponding evolver's platform. Counting down. 10, 9. Bai Xiaowen heaved a sigh. The evolver's world, I am coming. Chapter 1442. What entered his eyes was a platform suspended in the starry sky, like a giant mothership in space. This platform extended into 4 long and narrow passageways in all directions. After Bai Xiaowen came out of the trial grounds, he stood at the entrance of one of the long and narrow passageways. At the end of the passageway, at the door to the platform, he could vaguely see busy figures. Bai Xiaowen restrained his spiritual power, true inner force, aura and put on Grim Reaper's visage at the same time. He couldn't be too high profile when he first entered the world of evolvers. At the very least, his Lord-level template couldn't be exposed. Shao had reminded him not to expose the coordinates of his territory in the early stages. Bai Xiaowen went one step further and hid the existence of his territory as well. It was safer. According to Camille, Earth and the Interstellar Alliance should have some form of communication. Then, the news of the 5 members of the White Phoenix team advancing to evolvers would definitely be known by some well-informed forces within Starlink. They would suspect that Bai Xiaowen was a lord, and there might even be someone waiting for Bai Xiaowen. As for whether it was cooperation or threats, roping him in or suppression, no one knew. Bai Xiaowen changed his appearance and suppressed his spiritual power aura in order to hide his strength and bide his time. However, Bai Xiaowen didn't suppress his aura too much. Now, if outsiders checked Bai Xiaowen's spiritual power purity, they would think that he was an elite-level evolver, 5 priority. Bai Xiaowen calculated that an elite-level evolver was just right. This was because if a large team was unified, an elite would be the mid-level members of the team. If he wasn't a high-level member of the team, he wouldn't attract attention. If he wasn't a low-level minion, he wouldn't be looked down upon by Starlink. Bai Xiaowen walked quickly to the end of the passageway. There was a desk there, and a man and a woman were sitting there. The man had yellow skin and black hair, and looked Asian. The woman was a blonde with blue eyes. Bai Xiaowen's changed appearance was still Asian, so the Asian man spoke first. "Hey, brother, did you just advance to Evolver?" Bai Xiaowen glanced at the Asian man, then looked at the blonde woman next to him and nodded. Spiritual realm rule notification, unknown reason. Spiritual energy disguise detected. Would you like to use Eye of Truth? When Bai Xiaowen saw that there was no warning that the other party might notice, he chose to use it. Bai Xiaowen felt a slight change in his left eye. Then, the true appearance of the Atlantic horse appeared in his vision. Well, it turns out that it's just a beautifying effect. A Caucasian horse is still a Caucasian horse. It's just that she uses spiritual power to improve her appearance. Bai Xiaowen secretly mocked himself. At the same time, he was amused by his own excessive vigilance. In the end, it was the appearance of his father and the heavy news that made him a little nervous. Even if there were hidden dangers in the Interstellar Alliance, it was definitely not to the extent where every step was filled with danger. As long as Bai Xiaowen was careful and did not expose his and his father's secret, as a normal evolver, he could live a very comfortable life in the Interstellar Alliance. Moreover, an overly heavy mentality was not a good thing. It was easy to arouse the suspicions of familiar people around him. Bai Xiaowen quickly mentally prepared himself and said with a smile, "Yes, I'm a newbie who just ascended from Earth." "Are you two local experts of the Interstellar Alliance?" "Sorry for the disrespect." When the Caucasian horse heard the word Earth, the corners of her mouth twitched imperceptibly. The Asian man, however, became more enthusiastic and said with a smile, "What expert? If I were an expert, I wouldn't have been sent here to do odd jobs. Let me introduce myself. My name is Quick, and this is Neon. How should I address you, brother?" Clearly, Quick and Neon were both code names and probably not his real name. Bai Xiaowen did not intend to reveal his real name and said, "My name is Lu Wang." Lu Wang was actually Jiang Shang, Jiang Zia. Bai Xiaowen inherited the art of war, so he borrowed the name of Jiang Zia, which was not very well known. Quick laughed and said, "Brother Lu, you are an elite evolver." "Amazing, amazing. We are the receptionists of the World Illumination Society, responsible for receiving new evolvers. Brother Lu, are you interested in joining the World Illumination Society? With your ability, you can definitely make a name for yourself." Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "Mr. Quick, I'm new here and know nothing about the World Illumination Society. It's not good to join rashly." "Quick, Brother Lu is quite cautious. In fact, there's no need to worry at all. Our World Illumination Society is one of the 3 giants of the Blue Planet platform. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the authority to receive newcomers." "The Blue Planet platform? The 3 giants?" Bai Xiaowen repeated. "Our Earth is actually called the Blue Planet in the universe. Every psionic civilization has an evolver platform. Our Earth's platform is called the Blue Planet platform. Although this platform is not big, it is equivalent to a small city. Every inch of land is worth gold." Quick opened his mouth. The 3 giants of the Blue Planet platform are the Divine Court, Pan-Asia, and our World Illumination Society. The Divine Court and Pan-Asia have serious ideological conflicts and racial plots. Only our World Illumination Society is a neutral giant that doesn't ask about one's origin and only looks at one's ability. You can't go wrong in joining." Bai Xiaowen showed a curious look. "Which big shot is the leader of the World Illumination Society?" Quick said, "The World Illumination Society has a parliamentary system, unlike the Divine Court and Pan-Asia who have the final say. As for the core, it's naturally Boyd Hill, where Nina and I are. However, only those who have passed the loyalty test can join Boyd Hill." While answering, Bai Xiaowen also scanned the interior of the platform behind the registration point. Indeed, as Quake said, this Blue Star platform was like a small city. The edge area was divided into small areas, each of which had a stall with a variety of items on display. The closer to the center of the platform, the larger the scale of the stalls. There were scattered buildings in the central area, which already belonged to regular shops. Bai Xiaowen said, "Sorry, Mr. Quick, I have no plans to join the World Illumination Society for the time being." "Why?" Quick followed behind Bai Xiaowen. "Brother Lu, you don't understand the situation. When newcomers come to the Blue Planet platform, their top priority is to find a force to join. Otherwise, there won't even be a place to cultivate normally." Quick said and pointed around. "Brother Lu, you should be able to feel the concentration of psionic particles on the Blue Planet platform. It's quite thin. If you cultivate here, your progress will be seriously slowed unless you have a lot of spirit crystals to squander. However, Brother Lu, you're new here, so you shouldn't have many spirit crystals, right? Only by joining a force and entering the territory to cultivate is the right way." Quick was trying his best to persuade Lu Zhou. Bai Xiaowen still insisted. "Mr. Quick, after I understand the specific situation of the evolution platform, if I feel that the World Illumination Society is suitable, I will come to you to join." Chapter 1443. "Hey, Brother Lu, the World Illumination Association is recruiting this week. It's a good opportunity to join." Quake didn't give up and said, "If you miss this week, you'll have to wait another half a month for the World Illumination Association to register here." Bai Xiaowen raised his head and looked at the situation outside the evolutionary platform. This was a starry space in the universe, and only the platform had gravity similar to Earth. "Does the evolutionary platform have the concept of a week and a month?" Bai Xiaowen asked curiously. Quake pointed to the center of the platform, where an incomparably tall building with a pointed roof said, "That's the Blue Planet's epic clock. Not only does it have the time, but it also has the indicators of the psionic era. The entire interstellar alliance relies on the epic clock to determine time, and there has never been a mistake." Bai Xiaowen was interested. "I must go and take a look." Quake said, "That's right. Coming to the evolutionary platform and seeing the epic clock is a must." "Hey, why did you change the topic? Brother Lu, are you joining or not? If you miss this week, you'll really have to wait another half a month." Bai Xiaowen smiled. "Don't worry, Mr. Quake. I'll visit the evolutionary platform first." Quake said helplessly, "All right. Brother Lu, let me remind you. As a newcomer, it's best not to buy things from the stalls on the evolutionary platform. It's easy to get cheated." This sentence was purely a kind reminder. Bai Xiaowen thanked him and then walked away from the registration point. Quake looked at his back and shook his head with a sigh. "Damn, we missed another one." Nina said, "This evolver's strength should be average. It looks like he muddled his way up by hugging someone's thigh. He's only recruited to run errands and is useless. It's a pity that we missed the two evolvers before. But they said they already have an organization, so we can't force them." Quake shook his head and said, "These new evolvers don't understand the importance of joining a force. They think they can use the evolutionary platform as a place to stay. They're too naive. The evolutionary platform is a place where even breathing costs money. How many days can the 100 or so spirit crystals in their hands last them?" As Bai Xiaowen walked over, he was surprised to find that the popularity of the evolutionary platform was not high. The small stalls in the periphery were not guarded by real people. They only had a list of goods, indicating what kind of goods they had, the selling price, and so on. The stall even had a guest book. If a buyer took a fancy to a certain product, they could leave a message on it. This kind of trading method was destined to be extremely inefficient. Bai Xiaowen frowned and pondered. This should mean that the evolutionary platform had a limit on the amount of time one could stay. Perhaps there was a fee, or perhaps there were other aspects. In short, one could not stay freely. Otherwise, the owners of these small stalls should have at least sent a salesperson to oversee them. Bai Xiaowen looked at the list of goods. He was mainly curious about the goods for the evolved human stage. Bai Xiaowen focused on the equipment. There were no physical descriptions of the goods on these lists, only brief descriptions written by the stall owners themselves. Blade pattern armor, white quality, hardness grade B. It can reduce a large amount of physical damage and considerable spiritual power damage. It is the best choice for newcomers. Only 100 spiritual crystals. Buy now. Breeze sword, blue quality, sharpness grade A. Additional skill, fallen leaves sweep. Buying it is equivalent to having a powerful AoE skill. Only 500 spiritual crystals. What are you waiting for? Purple flame gloves, blue quality, spiritual power increase level 3. Additional skill, demonic fire. Powerful spiritual power increase. It is not a dream to let you kill monsters above your level. Only 400 spiritual crystals. Sold out. 6-foot rod. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes and fell into deep thought. It seemed that the equipment for the evolved human stage was very different from the awakened human stage. Hardness, sharpness, spiritual power increase, it seemed that these were the excellent indicators of the evolved human equipment. He did not know if it was an exception. The evolved human equipment did not seem to have any attribute bonuses, and the weapons did not have any attack bonuses. At this time, a thin evolved human passed by and saw Bai Xiaowen looking at the roadside stall. He smiled and said, "Newcomer?" Bai Xiaowen nodded. There was nothing to hide. "My name is Luan. How should I address you, senior?" "Oh, this pseudonym is something." The thin evolved human smiled and said, "You can just call me Steel Thorn. These stalls are to fool people. If you don't want to be tricked too badly, you have to go to the shops in the central area. Of course, the shops in the central area are usually more expensive because there is a rental fee. If you join a force, you can go to the territory and find your own auction house." Bai Xiaowen humbly asked, "Senior Steel Thorn, what are these equipment like? Is the description written by the stall owner fake?" Steel Thorn said, "It's not fake, but it's not completely true. It's a trap for newcomers." After pausing for a moment, Steel Thorn pointed at the Qingfeng sword and said, "For example, this sword is an excellent quality blue equipment. Its sharpness is A level, but its spiritual power increase is too low. When an evolver holds it in his hand, it's similar to a fire stick. The additional skill, sweeping fallen leaves, is nonsense." Bai Xiaowen asked, "Isn't sweeping fallen leaves an AoE skill? This skill should be quite rare." Steel Thorn laughed and said, "See, you don't know anything. A weapon with a low spiritual power increase is useless even if it has an AoE skill. Hitting a monster is like taking a bath. Besides, what's the use of a newcomer with such a low-level AoE skill? Can you pull a wave of monsters and kill them? A newcomer with such an idea would have been killed by a monster long ago." Bai Xiaowen understood. "Thank you, Senior Steel Thorn, for explaining." Steel Thorn waved his hand. "Don't be so genteel. Just call me Steel Thorn. Little brother, I don't think you've joined a force yet, right? Why don't you come to our Freemasonry and let's improve together?" Well, he was pulling people into the club again. No wonder he was willing to spend time chatting. This was also the reason Bai Xiaowen disguised himself as an elite evolved human and not an ordinary evolved human. If it was an ordinary evolved human, they might be willing to chat with him. If no one pulled him into the club, how would they know about evolved humans? Bai Xiaowen asked, "Are there any conditions for joining the Freemasonry?" Steel Thorn said, "There are no conditions as long as you're an evolved human. The purpose of the Freemasonry is to unite and help each other. It's also our duty to help newcomers." "Then how do I join?" Bai Xiaowen asked. Steel Thorn said, "As long as you follow me to the Freemasonry territory and leave a spiritual power mark, you'll be considered a member. After joining, there will be rookie benefits and cultivation points will be allocated. In short, it's much better than rootless duckweed." Bai Xiaowen asked, "Don't I need to pay a membership fee?" Steel Thorn looked a little embarrassed. "If you join, you still have to pay a sum of spirit crystals. However, it's in the form of a pledge and is temporarily stored in the Freemasonry's public warehouse. When you become an official member, the spirit crystals will be returned to you. Bai Xiaowen shook his head. People's hearts were not what they used to be. If Bai Xiaowen did not ask, Steel Thorn would definitely not say. Just as Bai Xiaowen was about to decline, a message suddenly came from the spirit world's rules. An unknown creature requests to enter your territory. Do you agree? Chapter 1444. Bai Xiaowen wasn't surprised when he received this notification. After rejecting Steel Thorn's invitation, he went to a relatively remote place and closed his eyes slightly. The illusory overlord token appeared in his sea of consciousness. Bai Xiaowen silently read Frowny Face request, inquiry of unknown creatures. The overlord token glowed slightly. The spirit realm's laws, sending request, seeking permission from target creature has permission. Transmitting data, transmission complete. After these two notifications, two figures appeared in front of the illusory overlord token. They were images of Cecilia and Li Shui. Bai Xiaowen secretly complained. The spirit realm's laws weren't intelligent enough. How did the two beauties become unknown creatures? Bai Xiaowen then responded, allow them to enter the territory. It seemed that Cecilia and Li Shui completed the trial faster than Bai Xiaowen. Note that completing the trial here didn't mean passing through the trial land instance. The trial land instance was a mirror space designed by the spirit realm's laws to allow new evolvers to adapt to their new strength. No matter how well evolvers performed inside, they could end the trial and leave at any time. There was no such thing as a new evolver returning to the awakened realm because they couldn't pass through the trial land instance. However, for new evolvers, their performance in the trial land instance was related to trial points. Of course, it was worth it to do their best. Cecilia and Li Shui should have first come to the evolver platform after the trial. After a tour, they finally found the teleportation array on the platform and applied to be teleported to the target territory. He didn't know if the two of them had concealed their auras. If they hadn't, they should have attracted the attention of the two guides of the World Illumination Association, Kuei Ku and Nina. Bai Xiaowen opened his eyes. He continued to wander around the evolver platform for a while. In addition to looking at the epic bell in the center of the platform, Bai Xiaowen focused on the shop buildings. Unfortunately, there were no real evolver equipment, props, or other items in the shop buildings. There were only some virtual images. Bai Xiaowen could only roughly collect the characteristics of the post-human's equipment. Beside the epic bell, Bai Xiaowen also saw the platform portal. Standing in front of the portal, one could choose to enter the coordinates and teleport to the target territory. If it was the first time a visitor to the territory, they would need to obtain the Lord's permission. The coordinates were inputted at an altar in front of the portal. This altar had a protective barrier that isolated spying, so it would not cause the location of the territory to be leaked. Bai Xiaowen was in no hurry to return to his territory. He waited patiently for a while. Before long, Bai Xiaowen received a notification from the spirit realm's laws. You've stayed on the evolutionary platform for 2 hours. If you want to stay on the evolutionary platform, you'll have to pay 1 crystal per hour, 1 natural day. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. Look at this annoying reminder. I'm afraid that I'll have to pay more spirit crystals per hour after 1 day. The rules of the spiritual realm did not mention what would happen if one did not have enough spirit crystals to pay for their stay. However, the result would not be very pleasant. The rules of the spiritual realm would not allow post-humans to take advantage of loopholes. Bai Xiaowen was waiting for this reminder, which verified his guess. He then entered the coordinates of his territory and stepped into the portal. The rules of the spiritual realm indicated that this teleportation would cost 3 spirit crystals, but it would be free for the first time. It's quite humane. Bai Xiaowen praised. If a silly new post-humans were cheated out of their initial funds by unscrupulous merchants on the street, they would not even be able to go to the territory. A white light flashed. Bai Xiaowen appeared in his territory. In front of him was a simple stone door. Li Shi's voice came from behind. Hey, Xiaowen is finally here. Bai Xiaowen turned around and saw Li Shi, Cecilia, and Jinmi. You've worked hard. Bai Xiaowen walked over and said with a smile, how was it? What did you get? Tell me about it one by one. Cecilia said, I was very confused at the beginning of the trial. I didn't even have a bow and arrows. However, in the first chapter of the Milky Way map, there's a skill called Bowless Bow, which uses energy to shoot arrows. After I learned it, I passed all the tests. After the third stage, I met a leader. I couldn't defeat him, so the trial ended. Cecilia demonstrated. She opened her left hand horizontally and hooked her right pinky between the thumb and index finger of her left hand. Crack! 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 A bone-chilling sound was heard, and an energy arrow quickly took shape. Then, as Cecilia's right pinky clenched and released, the energy arrow shot out at an astonishing speed, creating a small hole in the open space in front of them. Dust filled the air. It looks powerful, Bai Xiaowen said. Cecilia said, I tried it, and the result is that this bowless bow can even penetrate the protective energy of a level 11 leader. Bai Xiaowen nodded. The energy in your Milky Way map is pure energy with a priority of 6. In terms of quality, it's definitely not inferior to the leaders. It's normal that you can penetrate the protective energy of a leader of the same level. After Cecilia finished speaking, Li Shi followed her. Li Shi also didn't have a weapon, but she was good at close combat. Moreover, the first volume of the flower washing collection mainly talked about sword energy techniques. There was also a move called Furious Wind and Flowers that could be used without a sword. Relying on her fighting skills and sword energy techniques, Li Shi also passed a few stages. In the end, she was besieged by the leader and a group of elite monsters. Both of them had accumulated around 400 to 500 points. It was worth mentioning that their trial points could be exchanged for spirit crystals. 10 points could be exchanged for 1 spirit crystal, so each of them had dozens of spirit crystals in their accounts. Finally, it was Jinmi's turn. The moment Bai Xiaowen's trial ended, Jinmi's level also changed. She rose to level 11. Now, Jinmi was an evolver, at least in theory. In terms of skills, Jinmi's skill bar was empty. That's right, Jinmi's skill bar was gone. Feng Yi's special skill and the 4 dance skills no longer appeared on the interface. Instead, they had become instincts and skill reserves. Only one change could be seen. Jinmi had a spiritual energy value. Currently, her spiritual energy value was 1,000 points. Level 11 and 1,000 points of spiritual energy value were rare leaders. However, Jinmi could only look at them and couldn't use them. Bai Xiaowen comforted her. It's okay. You've become an evolver. You've also completed the transition of life and have the foundation for cultivation. Next, you can try to cultivate the Taiping Key technique. I'll teach you the inner vision technique. Chapter 1445. In the awakened stage, the inner vision technique could only be taught to the aborigines of the spiritual realm. Bai Xiaowen couldn't teach it to others. However, after becoming an evolver, the inner vision technique had become a kind of knowledge ability of Bai Xiaowen, so it could be taught. Of course, it could only be taught to evolvers who had spiritual power. As for the Taiping Essential Technique, as the top heavenly book of the 3 kingdoms, it was a Lord-level ancient book with a 7-point priority. This could be seen from the fact that the special elemental energy of the Taiping Essential Technique and the elemental energy of the Art of War could be combined. Both of them were ancient books of the same level. However, the Taiping Essential Technique wasn't particularly valuable to the average evolver. This was because every normal evolver had their own initial profession ancient book. And the initial profession ancient book couldn't be changed. The average evolver didn't have Bai Xiaowen's Overlord's certificate and could open 2 professions. Therefore, they couldn't practice the first volume of the Taiping Essential Technique, the Taiping Sutra. Of course, evolvers who had elemental energy or similar energy could learn the Taoist techniques in the second volume of the Taiping Essential Technique, such as the Qiao Rui. However, learning too many Taoist techniques wasn't necessarily a good thing. Not everyone was as smart as Bai Xiaowen, who could quickly learn and apply them. Often, they would waste a lot of time and only learn some superficial Taoist techniques, which weren't as useful as the skills in their initial profession ancient books. Evolvers didn't have any restrictions on learning skills. It seemed wonderful, but it was also a kind of beautiful temptation. For a special evolver like Xinmi, the significance of the Taiping Essential Technique was even more different. This was because Xinmi didn't have an initial profession ancient book, which meant that her profession was a blank. She could try to learn the Heavenly Book and become a Lord-level Taoist with a 7-point priority. Bai Xiaowen then told Xinmi about the inner vision technique, and she quickly learned it. Then Bai Xiaowen gave the first volume of the Taiping Sutra to Xinmi and let her meditate in a wooden house to comprehend it. Seeing the wooden house, Bai Xiaowen even praised the efficiency of Kit's construction. As expected of someone from the White Stone region's construction army, the key point was that there was a Gei in their name. Their efficiency was really high. When the Xinmi first arrived, there was no one in the territory. The original Luling, Jiujiang, and other Huaxia cities had all disappeared. The entire territory was a barren land with no trace of human activity. Why didn't Bai Xiaowen include areas such as Mount Tai, Hemming Mountain, or Beiping when he drew out his territory? That was the reason. Whether it was the Fengshan Mountain or the ancestral court of Taoism, they would all disappear. Only natural resources that were not man-made would remain. Kits led a large number of the skeleton corps. After being sent to the territory, he used the Taoist symbol on his head to meet up with the Zhenmi. After paying his respects to his mistress, Kits ordered the skeleton soldiers to chop down trees and grind straw ropes. First, they built a primitive wooden house for Xinmi. Xinmi was a knowledgeable and talented woman. She was well-read and had high wisdom. She told Kits not to rush the construction work, but to chop down a large number of trees and level the wood. When Bai Xiaowen arrived, they would then designate a place to build the city. Although the skeleton soldiers were not good at fighting, they were all strong men when it came to construction. The wood that had been piled up now had formed a small mountain. Looking at the more than 3,000 skeleton soldiers chopping down trees and carrying the wood like industrious ants, Li Shi said with a smile, "Xiaowen is really awesome. These laborers of the undead race are really useful. If they were other living races, eating alone would be a big problem, and they would easily slack off in their work." Bai Xiaowen smiled faintly and said, "The undead race can only be used as laborers. They lack spiritual wisdom and creativity. After we gain a firm foothold, we still need to bring in people from other races." Cecilia looked up at the sun in the sky and asked curiously, "Is this sun real?" Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said with a smile, "That depends on how you define real and fake. For our territory, this sun is real. Actually, the sun, moon, and stars of the territory were all manifestations of psionic particles. They were the result of the operation of the spirit world's laws. This was the same as the sun, moon, and stars of the planar worlds and treasured spaces. It was beyond the scope of ordinary people's understanding. Including the border of the territory, it was wrapped in a layer of gray mist. This mist was actually the border of the territory. What was behind the mist? There was no need to do so. Moreover, it was beyond the scope of Bai Xiaowen and the others' abilities. It was something on the level of laws. Bai Xiaowen then said to the spirit world's laws, "Now, I'm going to open the Novice Lord's tutorial." The Novice Lord's tutorial had been hinted at long before Bai Xiaowen's trial. However, it could only be opened after entering the territory. The spirit world's law said, "The Novice Lord's tutorial has been opened. First step, please use the Lord's token to bind to your territory's space stone." The territory's space stone was in front of the simple stone door that Bai Xiaowen had teleported to. It was an ordinary-looking stone tablet. Bai Xiaowen placed his hand on the stone tablet. The illusory Lord's token melted into the stone tablet. In the next second, the stone tablet disappeared. The illusory lord's token quickly solidified and turned into a token made of mysterious materials. The back of the token was carved with the territory's mountains, rivers, and topography. It was like a high-precision miniature map. There was not a single word on the front of the token. The spirit world's law said, "Second step, please name your territory." Note, once named, it can't be changed unless there are special circumstances. Bai Xiaowen checked the special circumstances again. It turned out that it referred to the territory changing owners. Only territories that had changed owners could change their names. "Xiaowen, about naming, should we wait for Sister Qiao to come?" Li Shi reminded. Bai Xiaowen shook his head and smiled. "Naming is the easiest. Our White Phoenix team has already disbanded. To commemorate, this territory will be called White Phoenix Territory." Li Shi inexplicably let out a sigh of relief. He clapped his hands and said, "That's a good name." Following Bai Xiaowen's confirmation, the words White Phoenix Territory were carved on the front of the token. Bai Xiaowen put the token into his storage space. The spirit world's law said, "Third step, it has been detected that your territory is currently in an undeveloped state. The urgent missing items include Territory Protective Shield, Plane Teleportation Door. Please complete them as soon as possible." Bai Xiaowen smelled a bad scent. "How do I complete them? Don't tell me I have to pay?" He then checked the use of these two urgent items. The spirit world's law said, "The Territory Protective Shield is a barrier used to resist the invasion of foreign enemies. It can be activated when enemies forcibly invade the territory. The Plane Teleportation Door is a necessary building to go to the Evolutionary platform, other territories, and to explore the Evolutionary plane world." Chapter 1446. Bai Xiaowen understood. Both of them were necessary items. No wonder the spiritual realm's rules marked them as urgently missing. "Tell me, how many spirit crystals do you want?" Bai Xiaowen sighed. The spiritual realm's rules prompted, "A level 1 planar portal requires 1,000 spirit crystals to open. That's too expensive. Why don't you just rob us?" Li Shi's delicate eyes widened. Bai Xiaowen laughed bitterly. "Monopolizing the market. No doubt about it. Pay up. Find out how to open the planar portal." The spiritual realm's rules gave him a hint. It turned out that after Bai Xiaowen entered the territory, the first ancient stone door he saw was a planar portal. It was just that it had yet to be opened. Bai Xiaowen followed the spiritual realm's rules and placed his hand on the stone tablet in front of the ancient stone door. He silently activated it. Spirit crystals flew out of his storage space and embedded themselves in the grooves of the stone tablet. The spirit crystals rapidly shrank as their energy was absorbed. The mysterious patterns on the stone pillars of the stone door slowly lit up like a canal that had just been filled with water. When the 1,000 spirit crystals were used up, the ancient stone door suddenly burst into a bright light. Bai Xiaowen and the others covered their eyes. When the light returned, the planar portal had officially opened. The originally empty center of the door was now rippling with a layer of blue light. It was mysterious and beautiful. This was a level 1 planar portal. With it, the evolvers of the White Phoenix territory could go to the evolver's plane in the spiritual realm to train. Therefore, this was a unique business of the spiritual realm's rules. No matter how many spirit crystals one spent, one had to pay. Then, Bai Xiaowen received another notification from the spiritual realm's rules. The planar portal has been successfully opened. You have obtained the right to join the Blue Star Overlord group. Do you want to join? Blue Star Overlord group? Bai Xiaowen inquired. The Blue Star was Earth. The Blue Star Overlord group was a communication group between the Evolver Overlords of Earth. Its function was similar to the QQ group of the Rich Goose Company in the Christian era. Li Shi said, Overlord group. It sounds fun. Bai Xiaowen said, it seems that the rules of the spirit realm encourage exchanges between territories. For a new territory, It was not enough to say that there were 100 things waiting to be done. There were too many things that were missing. For example, subjects, talents in various professions, food, tools, and so on. As for those old territories that have been in business for a long time, their own resources should be limited. They need to exchange resources with other territories to supplement their own lack of resources. Cecilia said, I just don't know how safe this group is. Will anyone know our territory's coordinates? Bai Xiaowen said, since it's a Blue Star Overlord group created by the rules of the spirit realm, there shouldn't be any security issues, unless a Overlord can break through the restrictions of the rules of the spirit realm and pry into the information of other group members. To be on the safe side, Bai Xiaowen carefully asked a few questions about the Lord group and finally understood the general situation. The Lord group only had the function of exchanging information. It could be a group chat or singled out for individual chat. While chatting, they could show each other the virtual images and data of their goods. However, after the deal was finalized, he needed to go to the Evolutionary platform and complete the transaction in person. The Lord group itself did not provide the ability to transfer territory goods. In terms of security, every member who joined was a Lord. This was certified by the rules of the spirit realm and was not fake. However, the other information would be edited by the members themselves, and they could hide the information. They could show it to others or not. For new lords, such rules were relatively friendly. It was just that dealing in person was a bit of a pain in the ass. However, Bai Xiaowen could understand. If the Lord group had the ability to transfer goods across territories and complete the transaction directly, not to mention the fact that the transportation of large quantities of goods would consume a lot of energy from the rules of the spirit realm, just the hidden danger of exposing the territory's coordinates would make weaker lords flinch. If it was a face-to-face transaction on the Evolutionary platform, the lords could first put small quantities of goods into their personal storage space and bring them back. For large quantities of goods, they could also use their territory's authority to transfer the goods to their own territory for free without anyone spying on their territory's coordinates. Bai Xiaowen later learned that fighting was prohibited on the Evolutionary platform. It was considered a legal safe zone. This way, it was also a good protection for new lords who made face-to-face transactions. Bai Xiaowen let go of his concerns and chose to join the Blue Star Lords group. He spent some time editing his information. He said his name is LV Wang and the name of his territory is West River Territory. He also casually filled in the information about his territory. Finally, he very wretchedly set the name of his territory and the name of his territory to be hidden. This made others only see the name LV Wang. Group message, LV Wang has joined the group. On the virtual screen that only Bai Xiaowen could see, a new group message quickly popped up. Taizong Tang, it's rare that a new lord has joined. Welcome newcomer. Candace, Rivendell, welcome newcomer. Why is there so little information? Taizong Tang, it's normal for newcomers to be wary. However, it's not a problem to send the name of your territory. It's fine as long as you don't reveal the coordinates. Group message, LV Wang has changed the name of the group. LV Wang, West River, hello, lords. I'm the new Lord LV Wang who has been practicing for 2.5 days. I don't know anything. I hope you can forgive me and give me pointers. Candace, Rivendell, this newcomer is very interesting. How old is he this year? Teasing. JPG, LV Wang, West River, 15 years old. Bashful. JPG, Taizong Tang, this young man is dishonest. Candace, Rivendell, yo, such a young brother. Is he handsome? I happen to have some time. Do you want to go on a date? Bai Xiaowen glanced at Li Shi and retreated in defeat. Li Shi was confused and asked curiously, the lord group should be full of lords, right? The serious kind? Cecilia asked, how many lords are there in the group? Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, I can't see the number. There were only 2 who spoke to me. So few, Li Shi said. Bai Xiaowen shook his head. The Lord should be very busy. If it wasn't for the importance of the newcomer joining, these two probably wouldn't be bothered to chat. Suddenly, Bai Xiaowen received a message from the Lord group. Candace, Rivendell, little brother LV Wang, do you want to go on a date? If you're handsome, I can give you a batch of flower fairies for free. LV Wang, West River. Bai Xiaowen fell into deep thought. Taizong Tang, I'm not that rich, but I can borrow a batch of construction workers to help you build the city's framework. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.